Now, to give an example, okay, it's a bit of a swear word at the moment, but Carlo Montalbani, South African filmmaker,
really good at pitching.
he's extremely good at pitching. As some example, I was pitching at the IFA Forum, this was 10, 12 years ago. He was pitching a film called Story of a Beautiful Country. And he reads his audience, he knows he's like kind of an all-white, mostly North American and North European audience. I'm sorry, of commissioning editors around the table, and they have this kind of like mix of resistance, this being an African filmmaker, and kind of patronization and wanting to do good. You know, that kind of paternalistic sort of approach. So he stands up there and he says, excuse me, my English is not very good, I'm a poor boy from Malaysia and Limpopo. And then he whacks them, they all feel, oh, okay, this humble guy, let's listen to him. And then he whacks them with this really intellectual, really powerful pitch. So, you want to knew how to play them and stuff. So, I mean, it really worked, and he got a really good response. So, I mean, it's up to you to decide how you play these things, but the documentary, it isn't a question of people with integrity and authenticity in their stories are going to get the money. There has to be that in-between step in order to get to the money. And I think a lot of it relates squarely to what we speak about today. Okay, should we start speaking about this? So we speak about proposal. I mean, just in very broad strokes. And then, because basically what you have in a proposal, the core elements are exactly the same as what you have in your pitch. What are the core elements of a film proposal, those of you that have written that?
Synopsis.
Okay, synopsis. So what is a synopsis?
A brief breakdown of the story of nothing.
Okay, so synopsis is basically what is the film. What is the film? It's a synopsis. What else?
Timeline. Is that important?
Okay, timeline would normally they might ask you for a kind of timeline of the filmmaker, but the timeline itself might fit into the kind of
synopsis.
Probably the treatment section usually. You all know what a treatment is? What is a treatment?
It's just this, it's sort of a breakdown of the film, but it outlines, it's sort of like an outline of the film.
Okay, treatment is usually, these terms differ between documentary and fiction quite often, but a treatment in documentary traditionally is the how. So synopsis is the what, so you summarize what your story is. The treatment is usually the how. So how are you going to tell the story? What is the structure going to be? What kind of editing techniques are you going to be using? What kind of film language are you using? What music? What sound design? What coloring? Kind of what is the film actually going to... you're basically trying to give a sense on paper of what this final audiovisual product is going to look like. So that is basically your how. And then there's a third basic question, which is what?
Logline.
Okay, so logline could be at the top. That's just as a summary of your proposal. That's very good for pitching, obviously. What is your film about? My film is about this, so you need to have a one line ready. But we've now spoken about the what is the film about, how are you going to make it, and then there's another third important question.
Your target audience, or who you making?
Okay, so they will target audience, but that could be part of this.
Why?
Okay, why you make it? So that usually would be called the motivation. So what are your reasons? Why is this story important? Why would people want to see it? And I think usually your target audience could be incorporated. Sometimes people, depending on the format of the funder, they might ask you for a separate analysis of target audience, but usually your target audience in this scheme would be under the why you do it. So basically it's three very simple questions. What is your story? How are you going to tell it? And why you want to tell it? Now the why can go in a whole lot of directions. It could be your personal history, your personal relationship, kind of what you experienced in your life. It could be that you studied in that field and you feel very passionate about it. It could be that this is an issue that the world, like in your form, that the world does not know about, that you feel people need to know about. It could take a whole lot of forms, going from very personal reasons to very hard political, social reasons for doing it. Now the interesting thing is, just to get back, and maybe Nadine, you will speak about your experience in this, but depending on the funder, the grant funder or the funder that's funding your film, and similarly depending on the person you're pitching to, you will weight your pitch or your proposal more towards one of those three elements. I don't know if you want to speak about your experience.
Yeah, I think
I think if I think of for example, the Action Commandant film, I think there's various stages of pitching because you also need to pitch your story even to the characters themselves, right? You're pitching to the characters, you're pitching to NEVF, then you're pitching to your ordinary person. So you do put focus on different things. I think a funder would always want to know what and how, but then speaking about the whys, I think that's more important to the ordinary person ordinary person, and even someone, a funder, potential funder that's not in the film world, they're more interested in your personal relationship to the subject. Then, yeah, they want to know obviously how, but I think what drives, what has made those meetings for me successful is more like getting personally into it, right? Because people are looking for a connection, and and that is also what's going to give you broader access, I think, when you're speaking to characters and understanding that why. So you are constantly pitching your film, but at very different levels. And obviously you're not going to be speaking budget and so on with characters, but they need to feel the level of passion there. So they're not necessarily interested in story structure, that might be a conversation, but yeah, personal relationship with the project is key at the beginning. I think, and then once you've got your trailer and you're pitching to different people, that's when you get into more of a conversation about how. But it is a thing of, okay, who is in the room right now? Yeah.
But I think, like at the risk of doing this too crudely, but you could broadly say there's three broad groups of funders for documentary. With subgroups, but basically you're looking at TV funding, or let's say TV stroke commercial, pure commercial funding, or let's say, and then the second one would be film funds, or let's say, the kind of funds that are more interested in the notion of good filmmaking, and then you get, say, social impact related grant funders, your NGO funders, your developmental associations, and so on. But so those are the kind of the three broad groups of funding for documentary. Now, for the TV funders, you would be usually focusing on content. So you'd be usually focusing on the story and why, the synopsis, why this is a synopsis, why do people want to see, they want to see a film about this thing. So that's what you focus on. When you're pitching to a film fund, like say, which I would include the Liezel Vermeulen fund, for example, or maybe even the DocTour fund, because they're nominally interested in developing good storytelling. Then you focus more on the how and why you're telling it in an interesting way, and why this is kind of a very good way of telling the story, as opposed to the traditional TV interview way, or whatever you want to say. So they would be more interested in the how you want to tell the story. Whereas going to the grant funders, if you go to the Verter Foundation, or to the OSI, or to the Heinrich Böll Foundation, or whatever, they're interested in what is the impact this film is going to be. So the motivation, so you're kind of basically loaded towards that. And you'll see when you do applications for funding, every single application form will kind of be weighted more or less to one of those. And you'll find, so for example, if you do a kind of a apply to NGO and they have a NGO type funder and they have a the Open Society Foundation, they're not really interested in the application form how you can tell the film. They want to know who's going to see it, how is it going to go to people, what is the impact, how are you going to change, etc. So it's the same with your pitch. So depending on who you pitch to, you will kind of lodge onto one of those areas. So you get to.
Yeah, so, a big thing for documentaries now is the crowd campaign, right? And felt like, Stephen Markowitz also, you can check projects that he's done, is really successful in crowd campaign, but that's a whole job in itself. And I felt like I also did a crowd campaign for the AK film, but when I was still busy with that film, I tried to do a crowd campaign, but I think the problem, when I first did that, I didn't have specific goals in mind. So it helped just starting the project and then doing a crowd campaign later in the phase, because then people kind of knew you were doing this project and were more eager to assist. So the crowd campaign worked, but I didn't want to overpromise things in my crowd campaign. I basically could just promise the credit on the film, but so many different people gave the 500 rand and then it it helps. You really need to have a goal plan for a crowd campaign, but there's like the why really throws that.
I wasn't quite sure what you meant by crowd campaign, but I mean, I understood at the end of
Yeah.
crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding,
Not
sorry.
Indiegogo or something like
Yeah.
that.
So
If you're studying for the afternoon session, there's a session on impact producing at 4 o'clock where Don Atkins and Liane Maastrup, that some of you might know from ECT, is going to focus on impact producing, which will touch on crowdfunding.
Yeah.
And then Francois and some other people are also doing sessions on documentary funding and co-productions and stuff like that. So like just taking these discussions a lot more in detail and broader. And welcoming Tim Knight, who is probably one of the finest storyteller trainers in the entire planet.
I love it when you talk like
And
that.
is just attending as a very interested observer and supporter of the Documentary Filmmakers Association. And before we go any further, I just, if you don't mind, I just wanted to pick up on something in the conversations. I also do assessment for the NFAF's documentary proposals, so I'm part of the team that evaluates all the proposals that come into the NFAF for documentary funding. And South Africa is one of the few countries, I think the only country in Africa that funds development, documentary film development. And so that NFAF fund is really very important to the industry. But what I wanted to say is that when I looked at proposals, apart from all the regulatory stuff that needs to be in place, and what you guys have just talked about, the log line or focus of your story is like up there. If that doesn't grab me, my interest diminishes as I read further and further down. Because to be honest, I mean, the last round we had something, each person had to assess something like 25 proposals over quite a short period. Nobody reads each and every single word of 25 proposals. We skim a lot of it. But if your logline or focus is really, really well done and your synopsis is really well written, the next thing I look for is character. So many documentary filmmakers have beautiful proposals and very well written, but I don't feel the character. You're not introducing us to the characters, you don't make us love them, and your main characters, the access to your main characters and why you fell in love with them has to like jump out at you.
And I think you can use exactly the same advice for your pitch. Because I mean, if you pitch into somebody verbally and they're not grabbed in the first 20 seconds, then they're unlikely to, you're going to see them kind of looking away and not really listening to the rest of your pitch. So the same principle applies. I think the kind of introductory line, the kind of call it the log line or the setting line you come up with, is the thing. I mean, you've got to hook people's attention. It's the same principle.
Yes, Francois. No, I wanted to just ask something about the crowdfunding. I don't know, I think there's been so many times where I actually wanted to do it, but then I felt it's kind of immoral, really, not really, I don't know. But like, it's kind of like asking for money from people for nothing, really. Like, whereas you can like maybe go and apply to like proper funding to get funding. Like, my thing has always been like, if I'm gonna ask you, Jimmy, as my friend, I know you work, you're all my friends, I know you all work. So if I wanna ask for 1,000 from each of you, I've always been like, okay, what am I gonna give you in return for that, Because I've got the skill. So, but I wanna know, am I crazy? But should it not be like that, if someone gives you 1,000 rand, so I'll give you a free photo shoot in exchange, Not just like, because people now are just gonna give you money, like I'll leave this room with 15,000 rand, and
yeah, no, I agree with you. I think for my thing is I didn't have the resources to like be making an exchange like that. But what people wanted were, that was a specific story, so people really wanted to see it done. Right? So that's why they gave, and a lot of people gave work comrades.
oh,
You know what I mean? So it wasn't like very few people outside of that circle gave. So it was people wanted to see the story made, and one of the things was, okay, we'll do the screening in Groenewald. that was important. So, tying back in with the fund campaign. But yeah, it was people that were very close to the project. So, and it was comrades themselves that then, because I didn't have like a PR department or anything, so it was comrades themselves that spread the little video that I made. Yeah. So no, I do get you, and I think the exchange element is important if you can, but you don't want to like overpromise and then you can't deliver to these people. Yeah.
But usually on these sites, there's also kind of a very well-developed perk system that if you pay X amount, you kind of get that if you pay X amount. So a lot of them go from, you can donate as little as $5, which basically gives you a thank you, whatever.
Yeah.
If you pay $20, you get a thank you credit on the screen. If you pay $50, you get an opening. So people also kind of want to be part of the glamour, and especially as Nadine says, if they believe in what you're doing, you want to see good things being done. So, I mean, I think I hated crowdfunding campaign. I never want to do it again.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of work for very little money. But I think a good crowdfund campaign manager, or producer, crowdfund producer, if there's such a thing, they know how to tap into people's egos or into people's kind of needs. I mean, they're not only cynically, but I mean, what people actually want. And so somebody who's got a lot of money wants to have the glamour of having a kind of a ticket to the opening ticket, they'll pay more. So it's figuring out what are people prepared to give to be part of the film and why they want to make the film. I mean, the interesting thing is, for me, the crowdfunding, a lot of it amounts to a kind of Starbucks effect, where Starbucks had a couple of years ago, this big sort of marketing campaign where, if you buy a cup of coffee, X cent gets, paid to poor farmers in Guatemala or whatever. And, the point is, the money that they donated to the farmers is way less than the profit they made in terms of more people buying the coffee, because people want to feel they're doing something good. And I think that's kind of what you're trying to tap into with crowdfunding as well.
That's a really great idea.
Yeah.
But it's become quite a specialist area. So I would recommend that if it's your interest, that you stay for that, or that you go to that session this afternoon, so that you use these guys for content, because that's what they're really good at.
Okay, so basically those are the 3 elements, or 4 elements. Let's say log line, and then in your pitch or your proposal, you have to do a what, how, and why. And depending on the product or depending on who you are, you can also tailor those elements to what you do. Should we maybe speak through the projects, or was there anything else you guys want to do before?
Just before we go further, does anybody have anything that they need to show on a screen, like a trailer or visuals, or no?
What things you did?
So shall we go in the order?
Sorry. Is there an answer to that question? Yes? No?
Yes.
What do you have?
Trailer?
A trailer on USB?
No.
On your phone? Okay, we'll think about that. Who else?
To the laptop, to the flash.
Okay, I think I wrote you have in USB. Yes.
Who else?
I think I have in USB.
A small trailer
Small trailer.
on a USB.
Yeah.
So then we can organize the screens. Sorry.
So maybe try to get, because we'll go down the list as we receive it, starting with Ashley. But maybe if you guys can just try to put it in put it on a list in a format before we put it up. So I think maybe we'll work this out as we go along, but I think maybe if you can tell the delegation going to Amsterdam in November, but you're up against, like in Amsterdam, and that's something like 150 or 180,000 visitors, of which maybe 7,000 are filmmakers. So you one, or maybe even 11,000 might be from you. One of very, very, very many, and you can do what you can to get sort of people to notice what you're doing. But I think also I think it's always good to come back to the film that you want to make. I mean, how many of you have actually finished making a feature or say a mid-length documentary? Okay. All right, so about 4 of you. You've made one as well, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So the 5, so I mean, as you, I mean, I don't know what your experience was, but I'm sure a lot of it happened with your own money and your own time, your own funding. At the end of the day, nobody cares about your film as much as you do. And you are going to be the person who's going to make it. So, you know, you can have all this marketing, all the hype, at the end of the day, okay, it'll be fantastic if you get money, but as filmmakers, you will push through and make the film anyway. So, you know, don't also get too caught up in the hype. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, the whole forum industry, the whole pitching industry, even starting with Amsterdam, that's the original one. You know, it's been copied in all these formats around the world, but it's become a kind of a money-making thing as well, because there are these commissioning editors that go that don't actually have that many slots. I mean, and even if they do have the slots, they can't make the decisions always, and they have to speak to their bosses, and it's usually a kind of a group decision. The spaces for creative documentary is shrinking. The spaces for creative documentary out on subjects that are not North American or not European are shrinking as well. So, you know, but at the same time, there are all these you know, pitching forums. I remember a few years ago getting invites for, I think, what's it, something that happened in Buenos Aires, a doc point or something in Buenos Aires, and they basically presented it as a rock concert poster with all the names of the commissioning editors in big letters. Nick Fraser, so-and-so, you know, whatever. And I think these people are kind of functionaries of the, you know, but I mean, but the thing is they're being sold as a chance for the filmmaker to get some money, so then you pay your 300 euros or whatever, $300 or $400 subscription fee, and that's, you know, but it's basically a business. It's kind of funds the market, the people doing the festival can show that they've show their funders, which are often municipal, provincial, whatever, that they're bringing business into area, and therefore, you know, there's kind of other reasons why things happen as well. So what I'm saying here, kind of use the opportunity you have, but also it's good to have a little bit of skepticism about the efficacy of marketing documentary film. I don't know, that's my experience. Maybe somebody else has a different view. Is Sylvia joining us? Okay, so I think let's start with Ashley. I mean, I don't think you need to get to the front. Maybe you can stand where you are. Let's give you roughly 2 to 3 minutes. So imagine you are, okay, no, so let's say we should do it for 2-3 minutes. So imagine you're meeting a friendly group of people and you have, so it's not a super formal pitch, it's just the way it's like you're amongst a friendly group of people that you meet at a festival. Oh, you're making a film. Can you tell us about it? Here's your 3-minute chance.
Yeah.
So if you want to stand up and do it first.
A little clip afterwards.
However you want to do it.
Okay, it's fine. I'll rather talk about them than you can see them afterwards.
So do you want to stand up?
Yeah, okay. Okay, so this film is a story about an interracial couple, but it's a lot more to the story than that.
Okay, can I just stop right there?
Yes.
You should never read on your pitch.
Okay, no read. Okay, these are just
If you
points,
can.
alright.
So just it should be in your heart. You know,
No,
it
this
should
is,
be-
yeah. Just a lot.
This one and not read.
Okay, you can glance at your
Yeah,
notes.
okay, glance, yeah.
Okay.
But not like Zuma glance. That's too much of a glance.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Okay, so this is a story about an interracial couple, but there's a lot more to the story than that. So the film follows a couple, Leonard and Monique. Leonard was adopted at the age of 6 by a wealthy white family, and so his circumstances changed quite early in life. And Monique was not brought up in a very similar environment, so she didn't come from as wealthy a background. So I like the way that their backgrounds are sort of breaking the stereotype where he got to go to university and she didn't. Oh, sorry, now I'm getting nervous. So they dated for 12 years in high school, and they got married last year. So they've pretty much dated each other their whole lives, and they've been sort of going with these defined boundaries since they were 16 years old. And they had a traditional white wedding, and they had a traditional Xhosa wedding, and then they had a Makoti ceremony where Monique was like inducted into the family. So that's the who. The what in this, okay, so this is not great, but anyway. So the what is, the reason I want to follow them is because I'm very interested in them. It's just a love story. The main core of this film is it's a romantic documentary, it's a love story, but there's the extra layer of them being an interracial couple and having to sort of go through these boundaries in the society where Many people are still extremely backwards, as we know, and this is just one scenario where I think, in a way, people who are dating someone of a different race, it's a small way that we're making small sort of bounds in society, although, of course, as I say, many people are not very nice about this. So I want to look at the challenges that they face, and also just within the family. That's also the important thing, is how their families have viewed this relationship, because her family wasn't as welcome to it as his was initially. And then there was one more point I was trying to say. And one of the main things I actually want to do is diminish the label. That's one of the things I'm most interested in, because I actually hate the label. I hate that we have to call it something. It should just be what it is. So, yeah, and I suppose if I can just mention, the reason I'm also so invested in this story is because it is my life. So it's something that I want to address for myself. So it's kind of a personal exploration, but through other people and using their story. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Shall we give our feedback and then we'll open it up to the
For the clip, do we take?
Oh, you're
should I
the-
put-
yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about the clip.
Oh no, did I do the wrong one? Yes, I mean, different, but I thought it would be cool if you would have started. Oh, actually, sorry. I just wanted to hear your name first, and maybe start with your that it's a personal exploration.
Okay.
And I was maybe just looking for more points of conflict, right? Like you said, the families didn't agree with it at first. So I was looking maybe for more of that, because I was looking at, okay, what makes this different?
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like there needs to be more of that.
Okay.
Yeah, in the pitch. And that's just, for now, that's just what I'm thinking.
Okay, for me, I think you just also, it depends who you're pitching to, of course, but I think you probably need to lay out the who is black, who is white, the race class thing that this couple is subverting a little bit more clearly for international,
Okay.
if you're pitching international people, because I think, I mean, we get that, but I think, you know, you took quite a while to get to that. So I think you can start off quite early saying this is a black Xhosa man and a white English-speaking woman or whatever. But it's actually this kind of reversal in class structure, and this is, which I take as one of the interesting things you explore. So I mean, I think maybe make that a little bit clearer up front. I thought the way you come across, you buy your interest in it. I mean, you come across as authentic. You come across as kind of like really, wanting to do this for personal reasons. Also because I think it is such a kind of a soft story. But what's not clear for me entirely is, I mean, I think as Lydia's suggesting as well, why is this different? Because I think, okay, what I'm getting from your pitch is that you are doing this almost as a kind of a rainbowist sort of
Yeah, so that's
idealistic
what I'm trying to
exercise.
avoid. I don't really want it to be like well, it is happy and inspirational, but
Yeah, but I mean, but there's no problem with that. I mean, I think maybe the idea would be to be aware of how that plays in the current context of South Africa. Because the current context of South Africa is not about reconciliation, about togetherness. And so are you positioning this story as going against the stream of increased racial nationalism in South Africa and increased kind of racially oriented discourse? Or is it that you want to explore the kind of tensions that this couple is going to face within both an old school racist South Africa context and a kind of a newly more racially focused sort of, leftist, vision of South Africa? I mean, are you locating them within that? I mean, I think I suppose what Nadine is also saying is people are going to be interested in what are the pressures, because that's what's going to make your film. So other than the traditional forms, like you have two characters, they love each other, their goal is to get married and to be happily ever after. So what generates your story? What generates your story is the obstacles they have to
Yeah.
overcome to get there.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, in a way, I suspect people are going to want to know a lot more about your obstacles. And I think, and it's a very interesting film, because I mean, sorry, it's a question, because okay, I'm married to a black woman, Indian descent woman, and, you know, and it's not, it works on, so, I mean, if you speak to her about how she feels the experience of, say, other white people speaking about our relationship, it's a very layered, nuanced thing. It's much more complex than, I mean, it's complex in a very, very interesting way. And I think, I mean, and which I think one could make, I mean, not about me, but I mean, one could make a very interesting film about. So I mean, I'd personally be interested to know what are those difficulties, what are the obstacles, what are the complexities that they exploring. I think it helps a huge amount to see them, because it's not an unusual story. There's interracial couples in every single country in the world, hundreds and millions of them. But it's very nice to see them, and it can be a simple love story. What you need to persuade people is why this story, why these people, why, and it might not be that they're very unusual, or maybe it's not a lot of drama, maybe it's just a beautiful tribute that you're making, but it's worth thinking through. I mean, why would people want to see the film in the face of so many other.
Yeah.
So there's a series that Jennifer Fox made. I think it's called An American Love Story. It was like an 8-part series on an interracial family in America, but it like really explored. I mean, it used it a little bit like the O.J. Simpson series that came out recently. It basically used it to explore a kind of, you know, the real racial dynamics, and it was a very complex investigation of race and class in America. I mean, but that's maybe not what you want to do, but you can just kind of possibly look at that. But I think people just want to know a little bit more of like, where is this going to take us? Is it going to be a celebration? Is it going to be a critical look? Is it going to be, you know, what is it actually going to offer us more than a love story?
There's also, I can't remember the name of the documentary now, but it was this kind of documentary love story, documentary romance between, I mean, it's set in America, but it's this Indian guy and he falls in love with a white woman. But it's really told from his point of view, and they use animation, but they really you get so involved with his family, right, to understand why they'd be against such a thing. I mean, at the end of the documentary, you also find out that, you know, now he's actually married to her, and you see how they're trying to combine their cultures. I'll just Google the thing and give you the name, but that could also be an interesting reference, because they do go backwards, right? Because this couple is already married. So you also want to understand that journey a bit to getting married.
Yeah, so that's actually probably what I want to focus on more, is the build up to now.
Yeah.
Because as I said, I only got married last year, so it's
Yeah, so
But people also want to see, what are you going to see in the film? Are you
Yeah.
going to see that build up? Where is it going to start? Is it going to be observational? Is it going to be told through interviews?
I prefer
Maybe
observational, but
different.
I'm still getting there.
But then you should tell people, what is your observational timeline? What are you going to film? We're going to follow them going through this process to get where.
This is what I need to work on. Because I don't really know where they're going, so I'm trying to focus on the past, but I don't really, it is about modern, about now. I don't really want to focus on like the past. I want to focus on the relationship now in the current time.
So the challenges that they...
But the build up to where they got now, yeah.
So this documentary is called Meet the Patals.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite funny, and they also use animation. I think check it out.
Cool, thanks.
But actually, I think if you can just identify what it is that you actually want to do with this film, all those things will fall into place. So maybe we should speak about that a bit. Somebody did.
Small things. Just be careful when you're talking about people's attitudes, because you might assume that we're all like-minded, but hey, the room might not be all in agreement with you. So when you say something like, and I'm just quoting you here, many people are still extremely backwards, as we know. Instantly you've lost somebody in that room who might disagree with you, with your point of view, okay? And that person might have a lot of money. And so say that in a different way. Say it in a way that is not judgmental. which would be something like, we all have different attitudes to these things, you know, we all see things very differently. So it's very important when you're pitching not to judge on behalf of anybody, because you never know who's in the room and where they might be sitting. And of course, racial attitudes, prejudice is wrong, and bigotry is wrong. But you might want to feature some of those people in your film, and you can't feature them in your film or get them on your side or have some kind of empathy when you're judging them at the same time. So it's very important as filmmakers not to judge, although we have our own opinions, you know. And I liked your trailer. I thought the visuals were really engaging. I instantly wanted to know more about the character. I don't know if it was just that it was at the beginning I didn't see too much about the guy.
I was trying to unveil him.
Yeah, but when you're showing people clips, be careful, okay? I know you're still sort of in the development phase, and we can see that. But be careful what you show them, because instantly they might assume that this is the story about the girl. And also, when you're telling the story about two people, you have to decide who's the lead character here. You can't tell both their stories in tandem very easily. Very experienced filmmakers could do that with a fair amount of ease, but if you want to keep it simple, choose who is the main character. And then if it's an observational film, it's always important to understand from whose POV you're telling the film, you're telling the story, and so on.
Ray, what's you think? What do you want your audience to think when they're watching this? For example, when I was watching the trailer, I was wondering whether you were expecting the audience to be surprised that it's actually a black fiance, for example, I mean, or not. I mean, it's kind of suggested that, but I wasn't sure whether. So, I mean, what kind of process of exploration or understanding do you actually want to take your audience on as well? And I think if you can find that, you would probably define your choice of storyline. And I mean, it's just a simple rule of thumb. I mean, the same Jennifer Fox, she's very big on stories, she's very big on narrative form, but her rule of thumb is always that story generates everything. Story generates style, story generates the characters, story generates the politics of your film to some degree. So I think once you can decide what that story is, whether you want to follow all the other stuff or wonder. I mean, yeah, you can say you explore these issues and choose a story that explores those issues, or the other way around. I mean, they go together.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to? Did you have any particular observation?
If I may.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. Ashley, first of all, your stand-up. Tentative. I know it's the stage, but one of the things one can do with a stand-up like that is work out in advance exactly what you're going to see. And don't misunderstand the words, but the beginning and end are terribly important. You might well have memorized them, working out exactly what you want to say. There's a sensation of power, particularly the end. You sort of trailed away. You were tentative about it, and therefore, as an audience, we felt your tentativeness. We need you to be focused, strong, and clear. It has been mentioned, and quite rightly, that there's, at least in the presentation you gave, there's no conflict. Now, all stories have to have conflict. It's hinted at, but every single story, to make it a story, to make it worthwhile, so somebody will listen and stay with you and not go to the bathroom or open a beer in the meantime. It's incredibly important to have that conflict in the story. Good news, bad news is very often a structure of damn near any story you can think of, or there's no story. Conflict is terribly important, and challenge. Well, a couple of other small things. It's the overcoming of obstacles that makes a story a story. I'm not suggesting for a moment that you go through every obstacle in a marriage, but at least make us feel that that we can sympathize with them, or not, whatever you want. But it's the overcoming of obstacles that is terribly important. And the other point, which has been made, is tell me what I'm going to see, literally, rather than talking about it. Talk it, if that makes any sense to you. So that at the end of it, I've got a vague idea, as a commissioning editor, more than a vague idea, I've got a pretty good idea of what you're offering us visually too. Thank you.
So I think to put it in, so we've got I think we have a solid idea of what. We have some kind of idea of why, but we don't have an idea of the how. I think or should we get a little bit more feedback from other people in the class? Anybody else feedback?
Can I ask a question just based on Ash's pitch? So if you are at the beginning of your project and you instinctively have an idea of where the conflict is, but you're not sure, do you just make it up, or how do you spin it up? And not make it up, but
I'm so glad you brought that up.
how does someone sell an idea that hasn't happened yet?
You can say you have a hunch that, I mean, your sense at the moment is that this is going to happen and you think this is what you'll do, and that seems to you to be the storyline. But as you know, it changes. So, I mean, you can pitch it with varying levels of honesty depending on who you speak to.
We've
But I don't
all
lie.
had the horror stories about documentary filmmakers who make things up. Avoid.
I mean, don't give a falsehood.
But like you have an idea. Yeah, you have an idea of where it's going. But I can't speak because it hasn't happened. It's because you haven't filmed much yet. So.
But I think you can mention that. You can say that it seems that this is going to happen, and if it does, this is going to provide us storyline. I mean, that's you can phrase it like that.
That's difficult though, because then if I'm reading that, it's not, it feels a bit wishy-washy, right?
See,
I know this is like it's a big, like hard.
The problem with this is that what used to be known as development, if you apply for development money, 20 years ago, it would have been you send an idea with your characters and an outline of what the themes are, where the story might go. Now, if you pitch for production funding, it would mean that you have all your research in a row, you're ready to shoot, you might have a little bit of research filming, and then you get your production money, and then you can start shooting. If you get your post-production money, it means that everything is shot and you're about to start post-production. Nowadays, in order to get development money, you need to have almost shot a whole lot of your film in order to get development money, and you almost need to know what the story is before you've actually kind of getting the development money. To get production money, you almost need to give a rough cut. To get post-production money, you almost need to give a fine cut before. I mean, it's ridiculous, and the reason for that is just because they can. I mean, they can delay the decision making because there's such competition. I mean, the way the international documentary industry works is there's a whole lot of trust fund kids making. I mean, documentary does unfortunately favor independently wealthy people around the world. If you look at Davis,
strangely enough,
so I mean, particularly in North America, and I think in probably Northern European countries as well. And I think that's, because there's so much that's going, so the commission, if you have to choose between funding a project in development that is only an idea and has nothing to show versus something that you can see where it's going, of course you're going to rather go for the one you trust in. So, and it's the same issue. I mean, that's what you have to do as a good producer. A good producer who should know how to get people excited without lying, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's you almost need to have made the film in order to get money.
Also, like just to start on into some, but it's true. Like I think Innovative is one of the few places where for development funds, you just need your written work. It should still be good, but international funds they even ask for like a scene or some kind of footage is needed now for the development funds.
For example, I've been working for a while now on a film about the South African writer Jane Fitzgerald, but it's a really complicated process, and it's a complicated film which is largely fictionalized, but it's presented as a documentary. But it's kind of a film that I can't go shoot, I can't go do research funding. It's a film that we have to have the money in order to make it. Now, people are asking for trailers, they're asking for, excerpts or examples, but I haven't had the money to shoot. Usually, observational documentary, you can go shoot yourself and edit something together. This is not that kind of film, and it's really proving to be a bit of a problem because people want to see what the film's going to be before they get money. And you say, well, you wouldn't do that for a feature. Why are you doing it for this kind of also kind of fictionalized documentary? Yeah, so it's real issues. It's a real difficulty. Any other feedback to Ashley? Jess?
I think I just want to echo again what Nadine said. Just because I know personally how you feel and like where you come from family-wise and like the struggles you've had and everything. I think a lot of people, especially today, I don't know if you're pitching to younger people or like a lot of people can relate to the interracial couple situation. So I really feel like personally, I would have been drawn in if you had started with your personal idea.
But are you actually being in an interracial relationship? So, okay, because otherwise that wasn't clear to me.
So because we're friends and I know both of our similar explorations of the situation. Personally, I think that's a really strong starting. It also adds weight to why you're doing this film. It adds weight to why, because like standing up there as a white woman, some people might be like, well, why is this white woman going to make a film on an interracial couple? But then when you say, this is my life, this is my story also, then it adds weight behind your...
It gives you a mandate. But that's so different.
Also, it's best to, when you do the presenting, when you do the pitching, to do it like in a more relaxed manner. In terms of, if you know someone, if you're talking to Nikki, then just talk to Nikki. Don't be, yes. That tends to persuade the people that you don't know the work that well. So if you're more at ease, and if you're more friendlier, not too much friendlier, just more at ease, then you would see the presentation would go much more smooth. That's my picture. Coming from an actor's perspective.
You need Sylvia's tricks. Okay, guys, so we've got 10 projects.
Just as on top of tricks, Tim has a website where there's a lot of information for free, storytelling and performance and all of those things. And it's timknight.org. And he's also written a book called Storytelling in the Anima Factor, which is available on dulu.com. All of these things about how to look and sound perfect.
Wow, I'm glad I came.
Okay, so guys, as we said, what we're going to do is...
Sorry. So I know we all have very little time to put this together, so that plays a big factor as well. But when you do think about it, to pitch it again, say it again, it's just a more concise kind of timeline or flow between your ideas of what the film is, because it kind of felt like it jumped around.
I did try and be prepared, but it didn't work out.
I completely, like, we had very little time. I don't know how mine's going to come out.
And then yesterday didn't help.
I have a constructive criticism. Is that okay?
Okay, so let's have a last comment and then we...
It's completely my opinion for the thing that we saw, which I enjoyed, was that the sound of her talking, it sounds a little tinny, and her voice is quite high-pitched. So if you redid that, or when you look at just her voice again, her voiceover again with a, it sounds like you did it in a room that echoes a bit.
Well, it was in that room.
Yeah, well, if you redid that when you want to pitch it, I think that would be helpful, because her voice is a little bit high and then it echoes.
Okay, and I think the point of this is that people also that don't know your work will immediately look at your production values. And the problem is that people, because there's some very beautiful visuals, I thought. The problem is that sound generally is a stronger marker of production value than visuals. People forgive bad visuals more readily than they forgive bad sound. So just be aware of that. So it might be worth doing a kind of a interview where, because it sounded like your mic was quite far away. So it might be worth getting a kind of a cleaner, voiceover for that. So because also that's their way of relating. When people have never seen this person, they want to grab onto anything they can hold onto. So they're listening to the nuances of a voice. They're listening to a class. I mean, you can pick up a whole lot of things about her just through the way she speaks. And so it's the best sound possible in a trailer. It's important. Okay, now as we said, we're going to, sorry, we've got to move on because we've got 9 more projects to get to. We said Nadine suggested that we get somebody else to pitch the film in 2 or 3 lines just to see how it's been received. So I'm going to ask Sans to pitch Ashley's film to the class in 2 or 3 lines, if you can, please.
Sorry, Sam.
Okay.
You can start by saying my name is Ashley.
Hi guys, so my name is Sandy Sochef, as I mentioned earlier. My documentary is called...
Listen, you're summarizing her documentary.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, am I summarizing it?
That's why I said apologies. So I hope you got the gist.
Beautiful rainbow love story.
Okay, but so imagine you had to tell somebody asks you what is Ashley's film about, and if you can in 2 or 3 lines tell us what the film is.
Ashley's film is about interracial couple that comes from different backgrounds and just trying to not be judged and live their lives the way, colorless.
And how does that feel to you as a pitch?
No, it's not bad actually. It's good actually.
Okay, what is missing, just that we know? What do you think?
I just don't like the term colorless because I feel like there is color. But I know the thing is I know what you're trying to say because he also likes the term. He doesn't like to see color. I'm like, but you do. So yeah, I mean Leonard, the character.
Okay, but think about what you took from your pitch and think about what's missing and what, because there's still things for me missing in her pitch.
Yeah.
And I think particularly the conflict
Yeah.
that Tim pointed towards as well, and what is going to be the journey.
Yeah.
I think that's not clear. Okay, should we move to Charles, number 2? Introduce your project to us.
My name is Charles Lehman. I am first and foremost Khoi. I'm Khoi son. The project that I'm going to do is the revival of the Khoi language. Khoi Tuap is an ancient language spoken by the Khoi and the San. It has different flares and it's got different vibes. But over the years, it has faded away due to apartheid, due to colonialism, but due to the main factor that people don't speak the language anymore, first and foremost, and people don't want to speak the language. Currently now, there are some people, language activists, and when I'm talking about language activists, I'm going to focus on 2, Bradley van Sippers and Denver van Breda. Both of them, my main character will be firstly just on the language. I'm going to focus on both of them. Bradley has done work far more advanced than Brandon does, but what Brandon did was he transformed the language into a Facebook page and a WhatsApp page. So that will be the future of the language. That is the who. The what. Where do I see myself? Where do I see this thing? I want to see people react and people buying into the ways of let's learn a new language and let's see how we can make this language grow. And I also want to expose the main factor that kids don't want to learn a new language because it is not spoken in school and it's not spoken in the common community. So, I think I've covered everything. Lastly, I just want to add that if we don't stand up to see the preservation of our language and our culture as Khoi, we would see it gone and missing. And that's what I want to bring forward in this documentary. Thanks.
I think I know it's not all about pitching, but I think it would be cool if you started your pitch by greeting in Khoi Babab, so you could say Tabede or something like that, that just grabs something, yeah. I think I know the people that you want to have in your feature in your film, and I feel like, I mean, it's great that you spoke about that the language is not in schools and that your in was, okay, if we don't do this, it's going to disappear. So I understand the sense of urgency, but at the same time, I feel like I want to hear more about the characters. For example, Denver is queer, right? I think it adds just something to the story, and so that's important to mention. Right, so I want to hear more about, okay, well, what makes these two language activists special? I want to know more about their characters. And they do, and Denver especially is very interesting because he does use social media in a different way than Bradlock uses it. And maybe I mean, you do mention it, but speak more about that because he gets threats, man. And also, like, he wrote a challenging article once and he got like death threats from AfriForum or something weird. I don't know if it was AfriForum, but he did. So that's important to say because it's like, these are not like, you know what I mean? Like, you need to elevate your characters, right? They're not ordinary. I don't want to say they're not ordinary people, but you know what I mean, right? So there I need to understand more of that, yeah.
I think I wanted to add that, I think that, the idea of the death threats obviously immediately raises the stakes of the story. You need to see what they're up against. They have, I think you've identified what their goal is, but what are the obstacles they need to overcome? What's going to make up the meat of the film, the journey of the film? They have to, in order to get to their dream of saving the language or raising awareness of the language, X and X and X needs to be resolved. That's what's going to create the drama in your film. But apart from that, I think the big thing for me is that two things. I think you are, okay, obviously within this group, rightly presume that people have a basic knowledge of, who the Khoisan people are. For international audience, that's not going to make sense at all. And I think you're going to have to if you're pitching this story outside of South Africa, I think you'll have to find a way of making bringing the history and the tragedy more to the fore, because I think, your pitch was, in a sense, it was a bit dry. I think you can start off saying in South Africa, the original inhabitants, the first peoples of South Africa, because also terms that international people can relate to, they were, things like that, Khoisan people could legally be hunted until, 1950s or something like that, and all those kind of things, because there's extreme, there's a kind of argument that there was a genocide, which that part of the disappearance of the language is a genocide, and I think you can paint a far more visceral picture of the effect of history or the present, especially for international audiences, to kind of bring it in. And then I think, so in that context, the fact that the language is, okay, it's not as dead as everybody says, but it's dwindled to a very, very sort of limited usage. And the fact that if you can get people invested in why it's important to make that, to bring it back alive. You want people to feel why their work's important. Why should a viewer in Poland be interested in South African language activists fighting for their language? I don't care. So you've got to find a kind of a way of, so it's about redressing historical injustice, it's about identity, it's about a whole state of things. And that's what you kind of need your listener or your pitching audience to, in a sense, invest in. And I just think, so that I always wanted kind of a visual, spatial, political context. And I don't know, you can even draw attention to, this stereotype of the Bushman, this picture that you always see, these are actually real people with a language and a culture that has disappeared. Because that's also a visual reference, that's a kind of a total anthropological kind of misused stereotype as well, but it's something you can play with and kind of contradict that in your pitch to show that there's this kind of vast linguistic and other culture that has been totally damaged by history of colonialism. As Nadine said, I think you also need to tell us a lot more about Bradley and Denver. We have no sense of what they're like. Maybe with Bradley you can speak about, you want to see him. I think if you see him with his dreadlocks and everything, and also visually he's very, he wears sackcloths and stuff, doesn't he? Visually I think it will grab people. I think, wow, that's an interesting character. As I understand it, he also goes up to the mountain to wash in the rivers and stuff like that. It's all stuff that can give a city-dwelling person that actually part of its return to language is also return to nature and natural values. I mean, stuff like this to, kind of open up. And I think, yeah, so as Nadine said, I think the interplay between the two, what do they actually offer that's different? You hinted at that, I think you can elaborate that more. And then also, what is going to make your story? What are we going to see happen in the film from minute 1 to minute 50 or minute 90? I think it's yeah, so I mean more on the how again, I would suggest. Anybody else?
I think just to add, a very important part of the story, Charles, is your research. First of all, what I liked about your presentation is the strength of it, your confidence, and that I felt that you were talking to me, and that you knew your story. I'm not going to repeat whatever the two of them have said, but really just to stress the characters, it's so important. For instance, Bradley does these traditional ceremonies with these huge kudu horns that he carries around in skins. So you can just, in a pitch, paint us a picture of that. So here's this guy with these masters. He's an academic. He has a master's thesis in Khoi history and place names and how the place names have been changed. And then he takes off his everyday clothes and he puts on his skins, he takes his kudu horns and burns and purple and does rituals that invokes the spirits of his ancestors. But that is also connected to a huge revival. So you quite rightly say, and you just like almost threw it away a little bit, that one of your characters is the language. I really like that. So you've actually got 3 characters here. Again, who's the main character? You have to decide who's your main character. You can't tell the story of all 3. But if the language is a character, how do you characterize that? How do you write that and present it in your script? Here's this language that was massacred like the people. People's front teeth were knocked out so they couldn't say the clicks. Then the language was, everybody took it for dead. And then along comes people like Pedro Dosa, like Bradlocks, like Denver, and a whole lot of other revivalists, and they go and they find that no, it's not dead, there are these burning embers, and they blow on these embers, and it's now a big fire, and this fire means that in the Northern Cape, they started again to teach the language in school. Little success in your story, but they stopped it because the government isn't on the side of the people as it should be, and so on and so on. So there are these ups and downs, like Tim said earlier. So when it's a story like this about history, and like Francois says, about a part of history that even South Africans don't know, never mind the people out there, you've got to paint very vivid, colorful pictures of what went down here, what really happened here, but not dry historical fact like you find on Google. I spent last night sitting and reading the extracts of the diaries of Jan van Riebeeck, which is what I normally do on a Friday night. and so you read pages and pages and pages of dry, boring stuff about the sun, the wind, and then suddenly there's a beautiful piece about how they came to the Khoisan people and gave them gifts of pearls and gold and stuff. And the people took these gifts and threw it down in the sand, and not only threw it in the sand, but stamped their feet on it. And not a single historian has ever mentioned that scene, and you find it like hidden away in the diary. So research, you've got to really do very deep research, but I don't want to hear that research when you're pitching. When you're pitching, I want to hear the drama, what I'm going to see on screen, the color, the sounds, the sight, the excitement, the heartache, the tragedy, the triumphs, the victories that are coming, and what are the people doing there? People are demanding things. They want an airport named after Cloete. They want their language back in the schools. They are shouting. So I want all that drama. Then, if I've got funds, I'm going to sit up and listen to you and say, wow, what a story,
But also, part of the research is identify your obstacles. What are your narrative obstacles, I think? Because there'll be a lot of them, but maybe focus on the ones that are going to work best in your film to provide you with narrative. If I may, you are sitting here with somebody who's very well versed in the field, so you might want to speak about production relationship as well. Any other input?
When I finish reading the diary, so funny.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when I was in film school in the States, so like 6 years ago, there was a workshop like this, and the filmmaker had actually just made a documentary on the last surviving group of 10 people that could speak a language in India. I think it was some Sanskrit language. And when he was speaking about his film, what really struck me and what I still remember is that he really got me to visualize the loss of language. He really got me to picture the idea of a whole language that once represented a whole group of people was almost gone. And that's what I still remember, like literally 7 years later, about his pitch. So maybe like focusing on people really getting to understand, like, what if the language you know, like, no longer existed, no one spoke it anymore? Like, that's a crazy thought. Also a modern thought, that because languages are becoming less and less like omnipresent as, like, you know, English and everything takes over. So for me, that's just what I thought. The other thing is that he got funding for his film from the National Geographic. They funded his film and then they put it on the National Geographic. I can't remember what the name of it is, but it would be interesting for you to just look at it. It was in India, and it was like the last 10 group of people that could speak a language. And the National Geographic gave funding for it because that was something that they found important. So it might be interesting for you to explore.
Other input?
Charles.
Yes.
I liked the tone and the confidence with which you presented it, and that is terribly important. Even if one is fearful at a moment like that, and one always is, however many documentaries you've made, you have to start again every time, and you have to go into it sounding confident about what you're doing. However, oh, by the way, I know Bradley, and yes, what an incredible person to make a documentary around. He's got everything. You could have invented him to be in your movie. My problem, Charles, is I still don't know what you want me to see. For instance, I know little about this area, but I know that once a year there's a march from wherever the hell it is down to the castle. I know the castle has got some horror attached to it with some people. I need to see things. You have to tell me your movie in a way in which I can see some of it unrolling in the pictures of my mind. And you didn't do that. By the way, I would advise, if I were advising you at the time, to speak about my people rather than about them. It's just a slightly different way of seeing it, but it makes it very, very personal to the people who you're talking to. My people, they try to destroy my people. And the other point I would make there is probably the Khoi language is probably the first language in the world, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it's arguable, but it's certainly somewhere way up there at the beginning. And if we lose our first language, the very first language that human beings ever spoke, now that is the tragedy. Not just a small group of people, but by God, its entire humanity was based on that first language in many, many ways. I think that's about it. I liked very much, I like the idea very much, but I want to see it when you make the presentation, in my mind too. So you transfer video to me, without actually having to shoot anything yet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles, just to add to that, I think if you wanted to, I'm not saying you should do that, but you might want to think about also starting off what's at some point mentioning your own process of becoming aware, because I mean, presumably as a child you didn't know the language, and something happened that kind of made you aware of this process, because that immediately makes people invested in the story because you invested in it. So people feel that you grew up in apartheid, the system of the language being associated with BJs or whatever the case might. You know what I mean? Like that.
Yes.
You kind of, and then you went through process, a painful process of political becoming aware, and you just mentioned that. I think people then, it gives you greater authority to tell the story. It makes people more emotionally invested in your pitch as well.
Now, I just want to thank you, Tim, thank you everyone for that comment. Why I'm saying the people instead of my people is, as a researcher, we tend to be observant more.
Don't. Take part.
So, I do not know how to document, how to bridge that gap as a documenter, but as a researcher, we tend to not get involved, we tend to just observe.
That's a very important point. When you are a storyteller, forget what they told you about objectivity, those journalism schools that train that's such nonsense, and researchers who have to be step back. Of course, you have to come to your subject with fairness and integrity, but you take a side. You are on the side of something. You are not some person from China coming to tell a story about the people of Southern Africa. You are one of those people. And so if you heard a British person talking about British history and talking about the people, you'd wonder what they're talking about. South Africans have this tendency to use a pronoun that is a bit removed, which relates somehow to apartheid. So use the pronoun that puts you in the middle of the story, because you are. That's the reality. It's scientific fact. You are one of these people. But as a storyteller, you take a side. There's no such thing as objectivity in this kind of storytelling. You are on the side of the language.
But also you can, you don't have to necessarily put yourself in the film, but for the purpose of the pitch, you do, because it is your story. Okay, I think again we've got to probably move on. Odette, can you please tell us in 2 or 3 lines what Charles' film is about?
Gee, that's funny. Hi, my name is Charles Human. I'm an actor, and I don't know if I mispronounce it. Khoi. Is that right? Khoisan. I'm Khoisan. It's the oldest language in the world, and it's been lost, as is the culture, and as are the people. And we are going to explore this ancient custom and tradition and make sure that it's documented so that our future generations will have an understanding and concept of our people.
Charles,
There's one phrase I didn't think about. We're going to explore. Now there I didn't think about. Thank you.
Can I just add one last? Would the 2 characters technically be language activists? That's quite a nice phrase. It just came to me.
It does seem to me that you probably need to mention this film follows 2 language activists trying to reclaim this. That's going to be the meat of the film. Okay, thanks. So let's move on to Jessie Zim's Song of the Sense.
Jessie.
And Jess.
We're obviously doing it together. Since we're
Is it okay?
Right. Yeah.
That's what we're used to with you. Okay. Pitches, double pitches. So okay, 2 of you should do it together.
Yeah. Because we're writing it together.
Yeah, sure.
So.
So just to be clear, so you explain that, just to maybe then explain your relationship with the film to the audience as well.
Okay. So hi, I'm Chase Musselwhite. I'm the producer of Song of the Sense, and I will be co-writing the film with Jessie Brand.
Okay, hi, I'm Jessie, and I'm the director of Song of the Sense.
Okay, so I would like everyone to imagine right now your mother, maybe your father, maybe your grandmother or your grandfather. What are they doing right now? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Do you know?
This is a question that has been bothering me for over a year. At the beginning of 2017, my grandmother died. She'd been living in an old age home for over 6 years, and I had not seen her. Her passing on and my distance from her, as well as the place that she was living over those last few years, sparked my interest and curiosity in exploring the space of the old age home, almost a world of its own, as it exists today in South Africa. Okay, so Song of Ascents takes a look at the oldest standing old age homes in South Africa. Originally built in 1916, Highlands House was founded as a safe haven for elderly Jewish immigrants who had fled Europe. Today, however, the home functions as more of a luxury lifestyle resort, employing over 300 staff members and housing over 400 residents.
So from Tai Chi classes in the morning to daily waxes to month-long campaign elections that the residents compete against for the resident committee election, the people who live in this home are very far from inactive. And also in the home, the carers and the residents are similarly linked through a similar history of segregation and oppression, both apartheid and the Holocaust. However, there's a clear binary between these people in the home, between the workers and those who are cared for. This film will explore these issues through fly-on-the-wall sequences, revealing probing interactions between the carers and the residents alike. Moments of activity and inactivity, themes surrounding death, race, aging, and socioeconomic realities of post-apartheid South Africa will be explored.
Okay, so the film is going to take place over the period of 1 year, and the main inciting event happened at the end of last year. So this actually happened. The City of Cape Town's fire department paid a visit to the home and deemed it unsafe. So the chief fire inspector gave the home an ultimatum. Either they need to completely fireproof and renovate the home, or they'll have no choice but to forcibly evict all of the residents and retrench the staff. So Song of Ascents, the film, zooms in on the daily lives and routine of the people living and working at the home over this period of 1 year while the home undergoes noisy renovations. Okay, so some of the main characters include Nobantu, a carer who's been working at the home for over 15 years, Juliet, a new 92-year-old resident, Joss, an amateur resident photographer, and Eric, the new stud of the home who's been secretly plotting to take over the hothouse.
So this film meets at the intersections of comedy and tragedy, both touching on how the residents and also the carers joke about upcoming death in such a mundane way, but also the tragedy of realizing how lonely these people are, how they feel abandoned, and just aging in general. We will all be aging, we'll all be reaching this point, and where do we find purpose in our life at that old age?
So for the carers, so these fly-on-the-wall sequences will flow into straight-to-camera interviews between the different carers and residents. And for the carers, their interviews hinge on a number of socioeconomic struggles, specifically around making ends meet, caring for their own families while needing to travel long distances to ultimately care for other families and other people. So the home acts as a microcosm for evaluating some of these issues that linger and also very pertinent today in South Africa. Thank you. We have a scene. It's very rough. So
yeah, we have a scene it's not a trailer. It's a scene in a sequence. Yeah. Can I hard drive?
We've been trying to cut it, so we've been trying to string together some scenes.
I think so. Well, I think it's just good to get feedback on. So how do we screen this?
Put it in there.
We
Whoever's
copy to the external drive to that.
You're the PC man.
just plug it in. Is it a drive that's formatted for both?
Yeah, it's already on there.
Oh,
It's formatted for.
Oh, Sans is still.
On the way that you two of you spoke, I think your first question, imagining what your grandparents are doing, I mean, it really takes you in because it immediately forces the listener to engage, you know, and they have to do work. So I think it's a very good technique to use. However, then when you went on, I got a bit confused about the tone because that first question very much suggests, you know, kind of loneliness and pain and alienation of old people, which you kind of usually expect from an older generation. So it sets us up to expect a film about that, and then you realize it's not about that at all. So just think about that, because when you are playing on people's emotions in terms of the painfulness associated with old age, and then you do something different. So if you are going to surprise them, then manage that surprise, how you go over into it. I also suggest you a little bit rehearsed maybe, so it's just kind of speak from your heart, I guess. I wasn't quite sure what the question of the film is at first. Is it about how do older people live in a sort of a privileged old age home? Is it about how inequality functions within the space? Is it about how people deal with loneliness and death? So I wasn't quite sure what the kind of central guiding thing is. I think you're giving a frame of 1 year around the fire inspection gives you a frame for a film that works, but maybe, again, in the order of your pitch, because you mentioned the themes almost first, rather than that you waiting for the story that's going to clinch the theme. So maybe the themes can rather develop out of the story frame, if you understand what I mean. Because I think your story frame is broad and wide and can allow a whole lot of different explorations. But so just look at the order in which you present that. And I also wasn't quite sure about the tone of the film, and then when you see the scene, it totally makes sense. I would definitely show the scene, because it shows A, that you film well, B, that you have nice characters, C, that you have access, B, that you know how to work with humor and editing on film, and that you are probably going to make a nice film, that you have skills as a filmmaker. And it shows the social context when you cut to the two ladies at the end. So I think that and in that cut, you'll immediately get this kind of idea that it's going to be a funny film, but with serious undertones. So I think that answers some of the questions that I had while listening to your pitch. So I guess the question for me is, should you play the scene earlier or not? I'm not sure. I don't know what other people feel.
I have one question, if you don't mind us asking. So there's the central event of the renovations, but there's another kind of smaller event happening that we still need to film, which is I didn't know this before, but in South Africa, if you have more than 200 residents or people living in an area, there's a law that means that you have to elect a self-elected governing body. So they have a resident committee that's elected through a democratic process every 3 years in Home, and this is the 3rd year. So they're going to be campaigning for those elections in July, which is also another event.
Sorry, I was just thinking, I was filming it in my mind there. So.
Yeah, and then
that should be fun.
That'll be lots of, I know at Highlands House there's going to be a lot of political stuff happening in there.
Yes. And there's a lot of infighting and a lot of people are already strategizing how to get some people off the committee.
But you've got some of that.
We have some of it, yeah. There's this one member who her phone will ring during the meetings, which we film. And she'll just get up and talk on her phone while the meetings. So they're very unhappy with her because she's not pulling her weight, and they're trying to figure out how to.
But isn't that possibly a stronger narrative frame than the fire?
Well, the thing with the fire is that it's throughout a lot of the footage, because it's the juxtaposition between people going so slow and it's hectic, construction.
But you can still keep it as a secondary theme, running. But it sounds to me, if you want to go for because I think the obvious frame is obviously a year in the life of a privileged, old age home in South Africa with attendant humor and contradiction and everything, which I think is enough of a frame. But in terms of building your narrative through that, I remember listening, as Sister mentioned, you actually feel, wow, you want to see how that happens, because you can have so many conflicts, you can have so many kind of real issues and prejudices and whatever coming out of the both. It seems to me of the two that could possibly be the stronger narrative line. You can look at some of the Why Democracy films. There was this one about the Chinese
elections,
about
the school.
Yeah, about
schools. Brilliant.
Kids,
class president.
Kids primary school kids electing a class president and the canvas.
Look at the Why Democracy website. And it was called Please Vote for Me.
We can get a copy from it. And the other film I'd suggest you look at, although that's much more along the lines of your serious questioning, is a beautiful film by a Norwegian filmmaker called Margaret Olin called In the House of Angels. the Norwegian title was translated as Soft Hands. So it will either be the Soft Hands or in Our Angels. And it's basically, I mean, in Norway specifically, old people, once they get put in homes, are kind of erased. People don't really visit them. They're very, very isolated. And the film basically deals with that kind of process, but it's beautifully filmed. And the way she filmed, I'm sure these fantastic scenes of somebody in the 90s, not octogenarian, novagenarian, what do you call them? Oh, somebody,
90s,
somebody, a lady in the 90s with kind of, obviously like old skin and sagging arms, and sitting in the bath and filming her kind of washing herself and played to Waterboy's music. And that's incredibly beautiful. It really has that effect of transforming the way you look at old people. I mean, I remember coming out of the cinema just wanting to touch old people's skins, and you know what I mean. I had that kind of transform because it was made with love. But actually, that's not what you want to do. But I think you get some kind of idea because there's quite a lot of humor in that film. So it's worth
What did you
looking
say
at.
it was called?
I think it was in English was called In the House of Angels. And it's Margaret Olin, O-L-I-N.
We definitely have some of those contrasting, like we have like totally some very overt funny sequences, but then we do, I mean, there's this one woman who's 108 in the old age home, and there's some she doesn't talk much, so they're very quiet sequences and scenes.
I like the fact that it's very clear that you're taking risks and departing from the usual framework, but it's good to have that framework in place so that you know what you're departing from. But that counterpoint between comedy and pathos that you're playing with is really beautiful. But it's getting the balance right, the amount of pathos in comedy is really important. But I like what you're saying about the story strands. I like both of them, with the elections being a clear winner. I mean, that has to be your main. But a parallel strand is the upgrades, is the renovations, because on the one hand they're renovating the building, and on the other hand they're all deteriorating and dying quite clearly. And then you threw in something about apartheid and the Holocaust. I would really steer clear of that. You have enough on your plate as it is. That is so rich. And so getting into apartheid and the Holocaust, and just forget it, it's gone. But then also ignore a little bit about what we said to other people about main characters, because it looks as if your characters are going to rise and fall. So there could be a Juliet chapter, there could be a Nobantu chapter, there could be Nobantu and Juliet coming back and disappearing. I mean, but just don't lose them once you've established them as main characters. Then it becomes about how do you weave their storylines, One of the most fantastic films that I've ever seen is Cloud Atlas, where they have 6 different storylines that they weave constantly. And in the beginning I panicked. I thought, I'm not going to keep track of this film. And you do. So be quite brave about having strong characters and using them parallel. I think this has the potential to be a really beautiful story. I think your pitch was good. The thing that Nadine was saying, just remember that, keep your youthful spontaneity, don't come across too slick. But also get away from that abstract stuff you talked about. You talk a little bit about theory in the beginning of your pitch, the social something. Whenever I hear those words, the social, I don't know what it was, significance or whatever, that's got nothing to do with story. Get very fast to your characters. The thing that I want to hear about here is the upgrades, the elections and the upgrades in that order, and how your characters fit into those storylines. So forget about the context of and Tai Chi classes, and I don't know what else you mentioned in the middle, that this is a safe haven, and the history of it being a Jewish whatever. That can come in your written stuff, but in your pitch, go straight into the character and those storylines, and you will have a really winning pitch. But mostly you're almost there, and as everybody else said, the trailer promises great beauty and subtlety, and the humor. I mean that what's his name, the photographer, the freelance photographer, he is just potentially documentary gold. and the way you play off him is really lovely, you know, using your visuals to play off what he's doing.
One question you might get is around ethics. You know, are ethical issues around filming old people. I made a film, Sea Point, which focused a lot on the old age home, and actually people there raised the issue, aren't you know, isn't this kind of exploitative filming old people because they are immediately televisual, they kind of, you know, they're frail and vulnerable, you don't exploit, you know, so you might get that kind of response.
So there is actually like this separate ward for dementia patients, so we don't go anywhere near that ward. There were very clear like boundaries that I set up. I have like long meetings with the social workers before even stepping in with cameras. So we don't film with anyone who isn't able to consent, first of all. But second of all, I think it's not a film about like just old people. It's about the space that's so interesting. So it's not just about like filming old people because they're interesting to film. It's because it actually is a world of its own. You know?
But, I mean, obviously the ethics thing people will still bring up. So do you recommend putting that in there, bringing it up, or just it being prepared?
No, just kind of be clear about your own strategy. What is your ethical strategy, both in response but also in making the film? If you are doing
and also if one of your characters die, how you deal with it.
Yeah.
Because somebody might die.
Some of the secondary, like not prominent, they too have passed away since filming. But we've gotten consent from both the families and from the people and from the home. And then we also show...
And never avoid death.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's just going to be a glaring omission in your film.
Yeah. And then we're also showing the stuff as we go along with everyone. So it's a very open process. Like I go back and I show them the footage and I show them. They get very excited. They think that they're in a big movie.
There's another. I was going to suggest you obviously have looked at Wiseman films about institutions, but that's not a very good reference because your films are a lot more humorous. But there's a film you might want to get a hold of called Alimentation Générale. It's a French filmmaker. I can find the name of it, but it was a film about a little. I mean, the tone of it is very similar, and a couple of characters coming in and out of a grocery store in Saint-Denis, you know, the poor area in the north of Paris, and kind of basically Algerian sort of shopkeeper kind of and his relationship, and they want to close the shop and they're trying to save the shop. But it's basically everything's filmed inside the shop and all the characters come in, and I think you'd probably, in terms of storytelling structure, it might give you some ideas.
Yeah, sure.
It's Alimentation Générale. But I can give you the name.
Like alimentary canal, it's got to do with
Alimentation.
I don't know what the French, the English is.
I think also just a lot like so many people don't assume attitudes. I think starting by saying imagine is fine, but I also like my grandparents have passed on, so when you say imagine grandparents, are like everyone's dead.
Yes, that's a good one. Don't start there, don't start there. Because mostly when you're pitching, people are my age and older, okay?
But then Francois said he likes, you know, being drawn in. So I originally was considering saying something, if you don't.
Okay, no, just phrase it differently. And a lot of us at some stage of our lives are faced with what to do about aging. Whether it's our own aging or our relatives' aging. It is just something that we all face at some point.
I think you need to somehow, if you want to say imagine whatever, then because Francois also wasn't sure of like the tone, you kind of need to do it in a humorous way.
Yeah.
I think and then get us into the humor from the beginning.
Go straight into story. Go straight into the meeting. You know, the council committee meetings or election meetings, and she's on her phone and she's not putting her weight, and they are angry with her, and you know, just go straight into story.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have a terrific film here. It's Jesse and
Chase.
Manhattan, like the
Like you chase someone.
Chase.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like Chase Manhattan.
Oh, forgive me. I think it's a terrific film. And getting that meeting, you might well decide, if it goes as well as we hope it will, to use it in pieces, building up, stopping before there's something finalized, other things happening, coming back to that safe meeting, building it that way, rather than having a long meeting, having it in pieces. It can be very effective. In the presentation, too much reading. It's socio-economic was what she said.
I couldn't remember the word.
Socio-economic. Now, I don't know what that is, but it's very impressive. But it's not the place to talk about socio-economic and something will be explored. Not that sort of language. Use English, ordinary, everyday, simple English. Passionate, ordinary, everyday, simple English. And don't read. Don't read. It showed every time you read, the language changed, you changed, and we lost you for a bit. Then you come back to something from your own passions, and you caught us again. Very formal in places. The focus, I think, and the storytelling will come out of the fact that you have that basic meeting and the basic clashes that go on. Oh, by the way, you might well, by the end of it, or the beginning even of it, if things work out as we hope they will, be able to compare that community to the wider South African community, because when you described it, it sounded exactly like South Africa, with all the politics and the hatreds and the trying to fix things and people disagreeing all over the place. Yes, comedy pathos. What a lovely mixture, if you can do that. And what you might well consider too is working out in advance the power people in the meeting, and prepare some stuff about them before or after, because two people probably will dominate. Know about them in advance, know who they are, know what they're likely to do, and have some footage of them. Overall, though, I think you've got a terrific story, and I would probably give you, I don't know, $250,000 as a start.
Can we have that in writing?
That's on record. We have it on camera.
Got it on camera.
Is that the mic, by the way?
This is
Where?
on the camera.
Aye.
Thank you. That's a real offer. Okay, guys, we've got 7 projects to go through, and so we only have about an hour left. I think maybe we also have space to chat afterwards. We are going to run out of time. So I think just, Jimmy, can you quickly summarize the project? What is Chase and Jesse's film about?
Yes, my project.
No,
Chase and Jesse.
Yeah, Chase and Jesse.
Well, I just love the project. I wish I could join you guys. But yeah, it's okay. It's very true. If we end up today, we see actually in Sea Point, yeah, I used to be living in Sea Point for 7 years. And yeah, go for it.
Okay, can you summarize the, imagine you have to tell somebody what is their film about in 2 or 3 lines. Just
You were to pitch it.
not the picture, just explain to us what their film is about. What if somebody tells you, what are they making a film about, what would you say?
Yeah, it's you're making about the people living in Sea Point, coloring, Jewish. Yeah.
You might want to add that it follows the year in the life of the fall of this old age home, and looks at different characters through humor and pathos, something like that. Okay? Okay, guys, sorry to cut you all short, we're not going to get through this. So number 4 was almost 20 to 12, and we have to finish at 1. What we thought is maybe, tell us what you want to do, but maybe we can limit the discussion maybe to me and Sylvia and Nadine for now, and if you guys have time over lunch to chat a bit more. Unless you want to do it the other way around, but I mean, we are going to run out of time otherwise, so, yeah. So you might have access to each other and not have access to us again, but whatever, what would you prefer?
Yeah, there's always a chance.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we move on to Judith.
Okay, so good morning, I'm Julie, and my project is called Mutemwa, which is a place in Zimbabwe which it had a leper colony. It still has a leper colony today. Okay, so the context of the film is the Liberation War in Zimbabwe in the 1970s. And this area was a very hot place in the war. One of the people from the area, a man called Godfrey Nunchi, became politicized and wanted to fight against the Rhodesian government. He got caught by them and got put in prison. During this time, his sister was also arrested for questioning. He had an amazing story because he escaped from jail and he got out of the country, went through Zambia, got out, met all other political leaders, got up to Ethiopia, met Haile Selassie, got up to Russia where he was trained to become a guerrilla fighter. So while his sister was in jail, the children were looked after by a doctor, Liezel Vermeulen, who was an Italian missionary doctor living in that same area. So, and white. So we have the black guerrilla fighter, the white missionary doctor are my characters. So she was also very brave, and she stayed in that area looking after people, some of them casualties of the war, and fighting in her own way against the government. So the reason I want to tell the story is because it's, I was born free in Zimbabwe, as they say, but I feel that we need to know our history in order for us to create the society we want, and that includes South Africa, Southern Africa, that we still have challenges, and I'm inspired by the courage of these two heroes, and I want to tell their story. Here we go.
Yeah, I just a few first thoughts. I think deeply, like, I'm also more interested in like what do we see now? So what does the film show instead of so much of the background story? And I might be wrong, but that's just my feeling. And then maybe it's a personal bias, but so I'd be interested in what makes the missionary character a hero. But like I said, that can be my own bias, but so missionaries in Africa is very controversial, and you call the hero, so I would want to know a bit more there. Yeah.
Can I respond?
Yeah, good.
Okay. Well, that's partly. I think the missionary aspect is very interesting.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah.
Because right now in this context, everyone's busy criticizing. Like it's very black and white. And what I love, so because perhaps my family are Catholic, and so that's maybe why I see that angle. But the other thing is that this doctor was actually killed by the Rhodesian government, and in about 79, somewhere there. And so although she was doing all this humanitarian work, she was killed. Yeah. So I think, and she's also up for sainthood.
Oh,
yeah.
So she's dead.
She's died.
Oh, I didn't understand that. I don't know if I understood. Sorry.
So I wanted to bring in like what happened. So of course this brings it's a challenge because so in order how to tell that story, we'd have to use it's like a collage of different materials. But then Godfrey Nunchi is alive, and we have
he's there and he's told his story.
Okay.
So he is living, and we could interview him. But with the missionary aspect, it's more a collage. So
Yeah.
we'd like to reenact some of the scenes, but I don't know if it counts. I mean, or like how to make that as documentary.
Okay. No, it's interesting. It's interesting. There's a lot of like obviously conflict as well as, for the audience, I feel. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's a good question. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I mean, like a lot of the pictures, I think you need to give a lot more of the how. I mean, what are we going to see? What's going to take us from minute 1 to minute 15 of the film? And I think particularly what confuses me a bit, I'm just not sure what the film is about. I mean, it's about two people, but what binds them? Is it that were they friends? Are you exploring this as two different responses? You know, are you trying to oppose the kind of the black guerrilla response, you know, becoming a kind of trained soldier against the kind of white women trying to do it through religious means, but they're both being praised? Are you trying to look at, compare those two? I mean, are you trying as examples of, you know, kind of fighting the war in Zimbabwe? Are you trying to kind of look at what, who gets recognition afterwards, the fact that she's a saint, but he might have been, I don't know what his situation is, maybe he's been forgotten. So it's not quite clear what your film is doing, because, I mean, there were thousands, or if not tens, or even hundreds of thousands of people involved in the liberation struggle in Zimbabwe. Why these two? What binds them? I mean, so it seems to me, is it the place that binds them? Is it their personal relationship? Is it I mean, if it's their personal relationship, then I'd want to know more about how he related to her, or the kids, or the kids remember them, or there has to be something more, you know what I mean? It's just, I mean, at the moment, I'm sure it's not, I'm sure you have a reason, but at the moment it feels that I'm not quite sure why these two people, and why particularly, which part of the struggle, which questions are you asking about the liberation struggle? So I mean, I would need to know a lot more about that. And I think particularly for a commissioning editor who might like you and might like that idea, they have to go back and present it this shot, and they say, oh, it's a film about two people that fought in the you know, liberation struggle in Zimbabwe. People don't know, but you know, okay, first of all, Zimbabwe, second of all, liberation struggle, third, it's a historical film. You know, what is it that makes it? So there has to be something that binds it together, or gives it that kind of special, either unique, you know, USP, what is your unique selling point, if you want to call it that. You come across, when you're pitching, as being invested in the story. You come across as one trusts you, one believes you. You know, it's difficult to tell you don't be so nervous, but try not to be so nervous. Because I think the one thing that you do is you nod when you've said something, and that makes people think that the pitch is finished. So just, you know, I think as you grow more into the pitch, you know, as you relax more into it, I think you probably, you know, it will become better. But I mean, yeah, it's difficult to tell you don't be nervous, but try not to be nervous if you can. And then I think also for me, the idea of at the beginning, I was thinking, and the two things that stand out for me is like the idea of the leper colony and the idea of the sainthood. Somehow, I don't know, those are the two kind of unusual things, just from a very crude point of view. And I was thinking, is there something about the leper colony joining these two characters together? Is there something more you can do with the kind of sainthood thing, and maybe ask more difficult political questions about how people look at history, you know? So I feel I would need to know a lot more about why these two characters and how they are combined and what you're telling through them. Yeah, some quick comments, so we don't have much time, but maybe some quick other comments.
Judy?
Yes.
Piece of praise at the top. When you did your presentation, you worked the room. Very often people work, the most powerful person they think is in a group of people. Don't work everybody. Look at them and talk to them just as you did. However, I don't know what your story is about. I don't care. I don't mean that nastily. I don't have enough to care. And yes, leprosy and sainthood and guerrilla fighter all in one story. Somehow there's got to be a story in there. I just don't think you've got it yet.
Thank you.
Any other quick comments? Sorry guys, we're speeding this up. We don't want to shortchange, but we just also want everybody else to have a chance. So any other quick comments from anybody? And what did you like? Anybody else? What do you think is promising, or what do you like about the pitch?
I mean, the leprosy thing for me definitely caught my attention in the beginning. So I was like, that was just interesting. But then I think it was just tying it all together. Why was everything? Then I got confused. When I tuned out, is when I heard another thing that didn't connect to the first thing I heard. And then I was like, my brain's being confused. What am I following? But those things individually are all really interesting. I think it's just coming across how they connect similar to the story thing. But yeah, it's definitely there.
And may I
Yeah.
just one. Okay, so I guess it's about choosing the protagonist, and that's one of the things. And actually, there's another character who I've put as a. I didn't put him as the main character, but he's a mystic called John Bradburn. He was a priest living in the area. He was the one who looked after the leper colony, and he had this amazing conviction. And he was also killed and martyred in the struggle, and is up for sainthood. So so perhaps the story is about him.
The other thing I was going to say is in the Zeitz, there's a video installation about a whole series of missionaries who were killed in a crowd. This one woman who was murdered in a crowd. I don't know if it's the same person, but it's just an interesting, different visual installation of a similar dichotomy you might want to check out.
So I guess the question, is it a story of 3 martyrs? Are they all from the same area, am I correct?
They were working in the same area.
I guess so that the area could tie them together, and that they all martyred. 2 of them died. One of them was a martyr in terms of having given up his family and having given up his life and ending up in Russia or whatever. I mean, that's another form of...
Well, and he didn't join the government. He stayed and farmed in that area, so that's...
So that would be one thing. But I'm just wondering for more, just listening, are you a religious person?
I was raised Catholic, and I went to Catholic schools, but I don't necessarily.
Because I'm just wondering if a possible angle to think about this might not also be looking at what was the role of the church and the missions in the struggle. Because I think that's a history that I don't really know. I mean, I know in South Africa broadly what liberation theology was, but I mean, you don't know. I mean, I don't know that it was above where. I mean, particularly given the context, as Nadine says, of missionaries being an uncomfortable area of discussion. And I mean, I think if you look at if you make a film about how the Catholic missions negotiated the struggle in rural Zimbabwe, I mean, that for me would be an interesting film to watch. I mean, that's one thing.
I think I asked it to get a feel for who's the characters, what are the it wasn't okay. It's almost like, okay, I wanted to say, picture games I could get into the story, but I think...
Because it was like a Brown Fisher story. I mean, he was kind of in the heart of the national park, the Ruderborn church. He was the youngest ever kind of whatever in the church, in the main Afrikaans church, and then he went through a process of questioning his whole belief system and basically joining forces or starting to oppose the apartheid system. So I'm saying, like, how did missionaries negotiate that? People who are with due cause accused of assisting colonial exploitation, but then are also meant to be, supporting people and giving love and spreading goodness on earth. I mean, how did they? I mean, I think that's interesting. It's like deeper questions that you can possibly ask. But then I don't know how your third character would fit in. I mean, I was saying that's one option.
It's an interesting question as a question for the document.
Yeah, what's the frame of what ties these characters together? I mean, then I don't know. I don't know how the gorilla character would then fit if you go that route. But that's just something to think about. Okay, shall we move on, guys? Sorry, we're getting right out of time. Okay, so up next is thank you. So we have Nikki Felbert's Origins of Human Consciousness. Are we seeing a trailer? Or?
No, there's nothing to show that I will show. My name is Nikki, and I'm African. Popularist findings are that we all have roots in Africa. And by the end of this film, it will give us more evidence through science and myth of how we are connected, all of us, to Africa. The film is predominantly where I go on a journey, and I follow this barefoot archaeoastrologer up mountains and under bushes to find sacred sites that have been built thousands of years ago and that are lining up with the sun for the first time in 21,000 years. So it points to ancient cultures that possibly predate the sun and the origins of human consciousness, which is the film's title, Origins of Human Consciousness. In the film, it is very important that we get the sites recognized. Dean Laprini, who I follow up the mountain, has been working on the sites for about 17 years, researching them, and he hasn't managed to get authorities to recognize the sites as part of our heritage, which clearly they are, because they are shapes of faces, they are sacred geometry, carved rocks, placed very precisely with a high level of mathematics to be able to have carved them in the way that they are, and to have placed them where the solstice and equinox sunrise or sunset shines through the eye holes of the faces or through specific triangular shapes through these sacred geometry sites. What else can I say about it is that what I'm interested in is how we relate to this now. So why are they there? Who put them there? And what do we do with it now? There's evidence of healing, there's evidence of ancient cultures doing ritual in the place, and what I find fascinating is that there are archetypes of different faces that have been carved in the rock. So there's an American Indian face, there are African faces, there's an Egyptian face with what looks like a headdress. And it points to different cultures actually converging in southern Africa at some time. Or having known about these different cultures, immortalizing them here. And part of our coat of arms in South Africa is diverse cultures unite. This is a Khoi saying, and we've taken it on in our coat of arms, and it actually goes back way beyond our known history. And that is part of what I'd like to look into, and part of what I think we can all feel as part of our culture, and part of our cultural roots, and where we come from our spiritual understanding.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I wanted to know, when I hear the pitch, I think of the Morgan Freeman series, he's trying to understand God and goes around, right? So I guess I would want to know what makes it different from a series if it is going to be a film, because I don't understand it, the beginning, middle, end of it. Although I do like the idea, but and then when you spoke about like the sites need to get recognized, so what does that mean really, recognized by the people, recognized by United Nations? I didn't really understand what that meant. Perhaps like also given, you said sites around Southern Africa, so perhaps just being also more specific, like give an example of 2 sites, and the countries. So I just wanted a scope of where we're going exactly, I wasn't sure. And also then again, like with other pictures, like understanding who is this person we are following. You mentioned her name, but very briefly, and so I just wanted to know more about that and how that person that you're following, or the person that takes us through the journey, how they are affected. Like you see in the Morgan Freeman series, like there will be times where he goes to another country, and then there's a space where he reflects on how this experience has changed him, or he reflects on something that happened in his own family and what that. So he's in a different country, but he brings it back to himself all the time. So I was wondering if things like that happen. Yeah.
Okay, Nikki, for me, okay, you were upfront saying you don't know what the story is. So I think, I think she is actually wanting us to help her put that together. I mean, I think your pitch is very strong on the why. I mean, I think it's very clear on your motivations, and I think in direct and indirect ways, I think that seems to be your motivation is very much driving this film.
Yeah.
I think it's not the story that's driving the film, it's your kind of desire for recognizing this, that it's driving the story. But I would also, this is my personal perception from your pitch, but I mean the fact that you started saying I'm an African, I mean obviously it's quite a loaded comment to make for a white blonde person in South Africa today, and it's a very politicized kind of debate, and there's a lot of I guess resistance from, let's say, radicalist quarters to a kind of a white Afrocentrism of the kind that was in vogue in the 1990s and so. So it's kind of very politically loaded thing. And I'm just, so maybe I'm totally wrong, but I mean, but it seems to me that somehow your desire, and tell me if I'm wrong, okay, but it seems to me that your desire to make this film is in some way linked to a desire to claim an Africanness, and that in this, on your own part, in a way that the outcome of this ancient history predating current whatever genetic or racial formation of South Africa is defined, is a far broader and, as you suggest, internationally inclusive vision of humanity. So. In a way, I'm just wondering whether the investment or your investment in the story isn't also coming from that perspective of, kind of the idea of aiming for a kind of inclusivity. And I'm just wondering if that opens up options for storytelling. I'm not saying that you should be the character or that it should be exploring your whiteness, but it just seems to me, I mean, I don't know if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that that's part of that.
Yeah, so the idea of saying I'm African came to me just before, and I thought I'd try it out. For me, the part of the outcome of the story is just for people to see each other as one, and not through race, and not through where we've actually come from, but that we actually, it's very strong evidence of where we come from throughout the film, but it's more about we are all the same, we are all human, walking together on this earth, and that's part of my message.
Okay, so but would it be correct to just say that the film is an attempt to use radical and very interesting archaeological, astronomical evidence that's been found, or that you're going to show, to argue for an inclusive vision of humanity?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, what might be a vehicle to best tell that story?
So I've put myself into the story so that it can be my journey, to create a story into all this evidence, apart from very factual things where we bring in scientists and other specialists to talk about the sites and their experiences with them. I've gone to these different places, had experiences there, and tried to figure out what each place means. But it still doesn't like for me. I want the hero's journey. I want to find a hero's journey for this film because I want to bring in that kind of entertainment value, to have that story.
Okay, but for now, you'll be the hero for it.
So I'm the hero, and I meet these interesting people, and Dean is a major character because it's his research that drives the film. But I've got to find my hero's journey through the film.
Okay, so guys, quickly, what do you think the obstacles to this? Okay, first of all, what do you think could be a conclusion, at any point, a goal for the story if we go along these lines, and what do you foresee the obstacles being?
I think the biggest obstacle would be to get it. You need to identify who your focus area, where your focus area will be. Now, do you need these caves to be recognized, or do you just need these caves to be exposed? Because I think there's a lot of questions that's coming up, especially with regards to it predates the Khoi in the sand.
I know.
So you need to be exactly as to say, if you're going to say it predates the Khoi in the sand, then you need to say this can't be an issue for Sarah. It needs to be an issue for the World Heritage Site.
Yeah, so it's more about their safety, the site
And
safety.
yes.
So they're clearly sacred ancient sites, and as they get more recognized by the general public, there's rubbish and graffiti and climbing pegs in them. So they actually need security around the sites. So that's what it's about.
The fascinating thing is the World Heritage Site in the field for the World Heritage Site without being declared National Heritage Site. So you need to get that clarity as well. That's why I'm saying you need to know exactly which audience are you pitching for.
An international audience, for sure.
But not neglected.
No, of course not. In fact, part of the movie is one of my other sub-characters is a man called Ishikwa. I don't know if you know him. He lives in Ocean View, and he teaches children the Khoi language. And what Dean wants to do with Ishikwa is to get the residents of Ocean View, build them up and teach them about the site so that they can protect the sites, be paid for it, and also take people on tours to the sites. So there's also a factor of him teaching kids, learning the Khoisan language. There's the factor of actually that the Khoisan would have interacted with these sites, even though the evidence is looking towards that they didn't build them. They definitely would have been the last people to interact with the sites. So there would be a visual of Khoi people interacting with the sites as well. Because I like the idea of that visual, and I like the idea of the inclusiveness and the children learning, and so that's more of a side story though, but it is very important for the film.
Because I mean that could provide a narrative thread, and obviously the kind of obstacles where people are kind of trying to prevent that from happening, or will they get to preserve the site, and obviously then you can get the audience invested in that.
Yeah, so that's one of the conflicts that come in.
But it does seems to me like your question, but the real question is a much deeper one. It's a political, existential almost question. And I'm just thinking, I mean, a film you might want to look at is a beautiful film by Patricio Guzman, Guzman. It's called Nostalgia for the Light.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Roxy, yeah,
Have you watched it?
Yeah.
Okay, because I mean, what that film
started
managed,
watching
it's a film about a very concrete political, historical questions about what happened to the bones of the disappeared people that were disappeared by the Pinochet government in Chile. But it takes that question to a totally the broadest existential, spiritual level possible. So next, alongside this actual very practical journey, we see these old ladies digging with spades through the desert trying to find the bones of their lost loved ones. There's this far bigger journey towards about existence and about unity, and it also tries to find a kind of a almost prehistorical, like universal truth. And I think it might give you some ideas, because it's tackling something that's very politically difficult. So I think if you're going to give a broader than current political reading, I think you'd need to go a lot deeper. It would have to be a lot.
Yeah, it's I would definitely build evidence in layers. And through science and myth and my opinion as the main character, but to leave it open as my opinion. Well, no, not really. I do want to make a statement about what it is, but through other people's opinions. But that it is obvious that it is opinion to leave it. I watch a lot of, I've seen a lot of films where people say, this is what the pyramids are, and then people don't like that because they have their own ideas about it. So I would like to give a very strong idea of what it all is, but to show that it is still opinion.
Okay, then I was also thinking this. I would advise veer away from something that's kind of sounds like New Age philosophy, because I think that limits your audience. I think one of the big strengths of this film, Nostalgia for the Light, is that it's extremely ethereal, but it never feels like a New Age type film. I mean, I don't know. It's a very unusual film, but it very concretely brings history and politics and astronomy and I don't know, like archaeology together in very concrete, parallel ways. Okay, guys. So, any more questions, Jessie?
Well, I think it's also that it's the same thing with the Paul Batson, because the Paul Batson and Nostalgia for the Light are like pair films. But like for me, the question was, which I think will help, is what kind of a treatment are you going for with the film? Because the Paul Batson and Nostalgia for the Light, it's a very poetic approach to looking into these kinds of histories and philosophies. Whereas you may be wanting to go for slightly more personal journey, person narrative oriented, kind of investigative documentary. So I think that maybe just clarifying for yourself what aesthetic approach you want to go for. Maybe for me, that was what I was wondering when I was listening. I was trying to imagine, what is this going to look like?
Yeah.
Because you can take so many different routes, So that was for me the main question.
I mean, also just to throw in, I think also what Francois was saying, if we're living in a political space, South Africa, we're talking about land issues. And so, making a film like that during this time is going to be very interesting. So you have to be highly conscious then of who you are, how you're placing yourself, you know what I mean, and what precisely you're trying to say.
So everything is told through, that's why Ishiko is in there. So he was part of the Parks Board, and him and Dean go and they're looking at, so it will always be with them when it comes to
I'm not saying the
sites being recognized. But that is, I know it's but I also like to make statements, and I want to push people's buttons. I want people to think.
No, I'm not saying don't take yourself out. I'm saying be conscious of that, but it's also an interesting time to bring it out. So
So I guess the best outcome would be a bold statement about common shared humanity in the face of a very kind of quite acerbic sort of debate around ownership of the land along racial lines now. So that's what you aiming for.
That is really a sub-story. The story is the information about the sites, which is phenomenal, and the sacred geometry that goes within the sites, and how that lines up with energy, which is what I'm interested in, and the astronomical lineups, which is quite universal. People are kind of interested about the stars, and so how. And then why? Why are they lining up? Why are they placed like this? And it does lend itself to some really big questions.
Last point, have you seen Craig, what's his name, of the two brothers?
Yes,
Foster brothers, they made a film.
Cosmic Africa.
Oh, you've seen it?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that, but it sounds like it would be.
Yeah, I actually want to bring in one of the characters.
Oh.
Okay. I will find him though.
Okay guys, sorry to cut short, we've got less than an hour left, so let's move on.
That would be great.
Okay, maybe can you wait till lunchtime, because we've got 5 more people to get through in 15 minutes.
I will be happy to give it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if you don't mind. Okay, so we're moving on to Roxanne. Last night a haircut saved my life.
I'm going to just put that over there. It's my USB. Okay, you need your presentation tips. Hope people are knocking around all the time. Okay. Hi, I'm Rox. and I'd like to tell you about a film that's very close to my heart. That's not it, but I'll get to the clip when I... So, beginning in Lavender Hill, which many of you know is an area notorious for its gun violence, and the film will end in an ashram in India, in the south of India, and thus begins the rather unusual journey of my character, Jay Benisa Reiters, an aspiring hairdresser, mother of two, who lives in Lavender Hill, and she's in the process of running her crowdfunding campaign to start her own mobile hairdressing business, with passion particularly to doing old people's hair, so maybe there's a synergy with our projects. At the same time, she's also, a few years ago, she did a course where she was taught meditation techniques and how to teach meditation. So out of her tiny flats in Lavender Hill, where there's 3 generations of her family all living together with her 2 sons, her new boyfriend, she's beginning to teach meditation classes to the community, starting with her family. And the film's going to follow these 2 strands as she begins to teach more and more people in the community and run this crowdfunding campaign together with her friend Chantal, who's from Mitchell's Plain. And the film's going to culminate in this grand pilgrimage to India, where she's finally going to go to the ashram where these techniques were taught and experience a celebration, a festival where over 100,000 people gather in one place to meditate and then ideally take it back. So it's this rags to riches transcontinental adventure that celebrates the courage it takes to follow your dreams. And what I'm very interested in is the intimate spaces that is created, both by having your hair cut. There's this feeling of letting your guard down, as well as when you meditate, you've got to let go. So these different scenes will be threaded throughout the room, throughout the film. And what I wanted to show you is a clip, which is just a character introduction to Jay Benisa and her flat, and this type of intimacy that's possible when you're having a haircut. So,
Yeah, I really like the trailer. I think even just like 3 minutes, and there's a lot there. Especially that moment, that woman getting emotional. Wow,
it's the first time she's ever had a haircut in her life.
Wow. Yeah. I like the idea of talking about meditation versus like this chaos, right? And honestly, what this character is doing in a different way for a community. But also when you started, you said Lavender Hill, place of gun violence. I don't think that that's enough. I think you need to, I don't know, man, because gun violence almost like too simplistic in a way. And I felt like you really need to explain it to people, like saying, this is a place where, of displacement, people have intergenerational trauma, kind of play, so that you understand almost the meditation versus chaos. You know what I mean? Get a real grasp of what that means. But yeah, I really like the character, and I'm excited to see, like she's doing so much now already, and what she would do when she comes back from her journey. Yeah, and maybe even in the trailer that you would have establishing shots of Lavender Hill to give more of an idea of it. Yeah.
I thought your pitch was clear. I mean, you come across as sincere and again engaged. I mean, I think people will believe you when they listen to you. You came across as having authentic interest in the story. You laid it out really well. The line that really spoke to me was starting in Lavender Hill and ending in ashram in India, which for me, that promises a really exciting journey. But then, and you sound like you have a good character, but then the relationship between the haircut and the meditation is not clear yet. So I think, as you said, they're both intimate spaces. It's also, a haircut is a meditative space. I think part of the reason why your lady cries is because it gave her the space. It's mean, there's very few places in the world where you can actually sit still and not be able to do something. I mean, it's maybe at a classical or jazz, serious jazz music concert where you're supposed to be quiet, or there's very few spaces where you actually have to sit and you start thinking. And I'm sure there's something about meditation because it's also massaging your scalp a little bit. It's a kind of, in a sense, a meditative space. I mean, it seems to me that, I'd be interested to know how you bring those two things further and how it develops from the one to the other. Because, again, you can look at nostalgia for the light. How bringing different levels of reality together. But my concern is that, you've got a nice character, it's engaging, it's humane, you obviously have a nice relationship with her, and you obviously invest in it. But as I think firstly, as Nadine said, you'll kind of, I think, having a bit of context, especially just, in terms of what she's coming from, what she's up against, would give you also a kind of a sense, because you don't get a sense of what the obstacles are in her life at all, and what she needs, and why does she have this dream? The fact that she can actually bring joy to people who live really, really tough lives. I think that could be made stronger both in your pitch and in your trailer. I'm just a bit, and I would definitely try bringing in the ashram element in the trailer if you can, because I think the problem is that you run the risk of, because it's also nicely cut and all that, but you run the risk of it being a little nice portrait of somebody, in a very positive way, doing something for community, cutting old people's hair, but then it's kind of the story is told, you know what I mean? And you can almost think that that is it, and that what we've seen is already the film. It could be like an effective 3-minute profile on an interesting person, interesting South African of a kind you get on SABC or whatever. And what's going to take it beyond that into a longer film? I think, so the trailer, while it's really nice, it gives us everything, but I think the trailer needs to ask questions. It needs to sort of suggest that there's conflict, that there's something that this film is going to ask, or something that this film is going to do. Kirill, I think you want to be convinced that you actually want to see more of that. But I think, you definitely have a nice accent, and it's a really nice environment, and you've got a nice filming style. I just think what the film journey is needs to be probably thought out and also more present in the trailer. So
I think it would be a nice journey if she ended up on the scooter.
Well, that was the initial dream. She came up to me to say she has this idea of running a crowdfunding campaign, and then I just had this vision of her on this scooter driving around Lavender Hill and zipping around to different people's homes. So that's it. Visual.
Also, I always think of, it's a funny reference, but Gotham City in Batman, right? So the characters in Gotham City, they can't, Gotham City shapes them so much, and you can't imagine those characters out, they wouldn't work outside of a Gotham City space, right? So the same, the role that Lavender Hill plays in her life must be made clear, because she even ends by saying, I want to be better than Lavender Hill. So what does that mean? Yeah.
Well, what does it mean to be traversing spaces in a place where spatial politics are very tightly controlled?
Yeah. Especially because she's in Constitution Court, so there's a lot concentration of more gun violence in that area because there's high-ranking gang leaders. So there's a lot of shootouts where she stays, and there's a lot of schools, so there's all of that.
You need to play more with that and the relaxation element.
Yeah.
So also when you're pitching, everybody knows how instantly relaxing it is to have somebody fiddle with your hair. I just fall asleep instantly. So you've really got to play with the juxtaposition more of this extremely violent, tiny island in the southern suburbs, surrounded by quite calm places like where Tim stays around the corner, nobody shoots him. But just there,
not so far,
across the road in Lavender Hill from Isenberg, is this surface paradise and quite cool laid-back place. And then there's this island where they're killing each other, and then there's this relaxation that she offers on this tiny, crazy island. But the relaxation goes deeper. She wants to pursue it all the way to some other culture far away across the sea, which is kind of weird.
But also, I think a deeper question, psychological question as well, is what does looking good mean if your life is really tough and you really have trauma on a daily basis, or stress on a daily basis, what does your life, what does looking good mean? Like, I remember, I made a film in Bonteheuwel many years ago, and people had no money, and they were really struggling, and they were really, really difficult situation. But then I remember one guy buying his kid a pair of at the time 1,200 rand sneakers. And at the time, like, I couldn't understand, why would you, if you had so little money, why would you spend all your money on buying a pair of shoes? And he said to me, you don't understand. And he was right. I mean, it took me a while to understand that. I mean, like, the kind of thing that what it meant for his son to have something to look forward to, just to something to hold on to feel proud about. I mean, it's just, the psychological value of that is much huger than, from the outside you might expect. And so I think it's the kind of idea of, like, what does looking good mean in a difficult situation is something to explore.
Also think maybe, but like in post, it's a suggestion, like, I like that the space is so pink and it feels so warm, and so I actually play with color. Yeah.
And looking good on the outside, I think so.
Feeling.
So, you want to comment from Sans?
No, Rox, I was going to ask if maybe during the time you've been traveling to Levin to shoot Ujay, if you've witnessed any gun violence, or if Jaybolisa has got any footage on her phone, so that maybe while she's doing the hair inside, you can hear the gunshots, stuff, whatever happening outside. So there's that.
Well, in the virtual reality project, I'm actually creating the experience of having a heel haircut and playing with that sense of gunshots and having
Okay.
That's another project.
Okay, I think we could probably need to move on.
How many projects do we have now?
Probably need to speak.
Okay, we're going to have to run over. Does anybody object to running until 1:30 instead of 1 o'clock?
Yeah, that's fine.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yes. Okay.
Oh, I guess we can have a little bit more breathing space.
We have the guys from the innovative. Shall I offer them to come and sit in?
How do you guys feel about that? Or maybe should they come for our final round of pitches maybe? What do you guys, what would you prefer? So we don't want you to freeze up now.
I think we should do the one like that. Keep them the same for now, like everyone do how we've all done it. And then see how much time there's at the end too.
And then maybe invite them a bit. Who is he? Okay. Well. It's people you do want to impress. Okay, so let's move on to Sans with using the way crew by Roxanne Dalton. So Roxanne, maybe what is your involvement?
It changes, but I'm helping with the edits, a little bit of producing, a bit of sound of sets, and concept.
Okay.
And I just love the story.
Hi guys, so I'm just going to jump straight to it. I'm not going to...
I'll get the pictures.
Oh, okay. So basically, when I was in varsity, 2000 and something, I'm quite old. So my best friend then, Odds, used to have like episodes left. That's what I would call them. She would act weird, like she would just randomly scream, she would see things. I didn't understand what was happening. And then she told me that she's got a calling. And then since then, somehow I've kind of like attracted people or became friends with people with a calling. And even now here in Cape Town, my best friend has a calling. That group of friends, they've got a calling, and they're lesbians. So I've always wondered how it's possible, how does it happen, that you become homosexual and have a calling? Because we've always been told that being gay or homosexual is un-African, but then ancestors recognize you and they want to use you. For those who don't know what ancestors are, so basically the question that you might have is what happens when you die? When you die, your body gets buried down on the ground or whatever, but then your spirit lives on. right? So you become an ancestor. And in the African tradition or religion, we always connect to ancestors to get healed and to get blessings. So my main character, Ayamangalisa Bali, is in the process of becoming a gogo, which is a grandmother or a grandfather in the traditional spiritual African religion, Sangoma training, right? So I met her about 3 years ago, and I've been working on this documentary for almost 3 years. And since then, she's been going through things, right? She had to drop out of university, CPUT, when she was doing her first year because she had episodes. She was screaming in class, she was doing weird things. And then another character in the story called Ukoli, who I was shooting last week, happened to be doing a second or third year that time. And she had accepted a calling. So she knew what was happening. So the lecturers asked her to help or like speak to Aya and find out what's happening. So she explained that Aya needs to do this and that and that and that, and then she'll be okay. But then she had to drop out. She dropped out, and then she started paying attention more to her calling. Mind you, she's raised by Christian parents who know the history of the family with the Sangomas, and that's not, I choose to ignore it and follow the Christian type of religion. But then they've learned to accept her with her gayness. Now, the reason why I feel it's important to tell the story that she told me is that what she's experiencing now when they go to ceremonies is that heterosexual men will always undermine homosexual traditional healers. And in the community, they've been called witches or, all of that. Because it's like when they heal people, it's as if they're going to rub off being gay to them. Or it's like something that they just put in and, they become. So they get judged a lot. So she says, when she becomes a gogo, which she's in Joburg now, will be traveling to Joburg to shoot her last stage of her calling to become a gogo, which is something very superior. And she will basically be training people to become, not to really become because you've got a calling, right? But you train how your spirit works, how to see things clearer and everything. So she'll be doing that. So heterosexual people, gay people, everyone will be going to her for consultation. So they won't have a choice but to respect her. And, so they won't be like, oh, you're gay, I can't come to you, blah, 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 because they would have seen her in their dreams, Yeah, hope that makes sense. What else? So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you.
Can I mention just one thing that stands, my favorite part is there's a wonderful irony in that she's got this calling and her job is working at a call center.
I really like the pitch, and also that this is a friend of yours, so that makes me feel like confident that you have access to the world. And also when you said that she had these episodes, so that locked me in, and really I understood like all the obstacles, with the religion and dropping out of university, and also that this is element of other people would undermine her, right? So I also understood. So it was this interesting, like she wants to heal and she's a healer, but there's still this violence, in our world. So that's interesting. I think the only question that I have is how you hope the story would end. So what point are you bringing us to? Like, I understand all those obstacles, and that's cool. But yeah, what do you leave us with?
Okay.
Yeah, what is the kind of the turning points of the journey?
Okay, so the turning point or the end of the journey is that right now she's in Joburg, right? Getting training to become a gogo. So when she finishes there, she will be called Gogo Ayamangalisa or Gogo whatever name they're going to give her there, I'm not sure yet. So as I mentioned in my last point, that she'll be training now. She'll be a trainer, spiritual trainer.
So you leave her like
yeah, so we end with the final ceremony, which is going to do here in Cape Town. There's a thing that they do in that ceremony, I forgot what it's called. They find a cow, and then it will be hidden somewhere. She doesn't know where this cow is. She doesn't know the color of the cow. And then in order for her to pass, to say, okay, this is your certificate, she has to tell them where that cow is. Go find it and bring it. And then she will get a stick with when the cow gets slaughtered, what is it? The hair or whatever of the cow will be that thing, because it will be a guidance. So that will be that closing ceremony. Everyone now is referring to her as Gogo Aigo.
Have you been following, so you've been filming already?
Yes, for the last 2-3 years.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think that should be in the pictures while that you have been filming.
Yes, I know. I know. Like 14 days of, yeah.
For me, I think it's a nice pitch. I think just in terms of showing stills while you're talking, I think it worked in this context, but just think about how you're going to do that when you pitch the project to, say, somebody you meet in a bar or, kind of at a pitching, because you're not going to have that option. So you might want to sort of pitch and then say, here's a couple of stills to explain. So just think, but it worked within this context, but just be aware of that. Yeah. I think you also just probably need to be a little bit more clearer for if you're pitching to a foreign audience. She got a calling. I mean, people outside South Africa wouldn't necessarily know what that is. You can maybe give the context of, in South Africa, sangomas are traditionally male. And explain what a sangoma is, what European colonialists used to call witch doctors or something. Give that kind of context just so that people know what you're talking about. And obviously, when you bring in your pitch, you had a line saying "and a lesbian," and you kind of almost say it by the way. So if you're going to do that, use that by the way, and just almost more ironically, or put it up front. I think make it part of the pitch quite clearly. Now, I'm not totally yet clear what the question of the film is. Is it really kind of a gay female sangoma? I mean, maybe you can elaborate the conflict a bit more to see what is your character up against to get to the final point. I mean, maybe you can be a bit clearer than that. And I think also, again, I mean, your pitch is, I think of all the pitches so far, it's probably the kind of one with the clearest or more immediately clear or immediately impactful what. I mean, it's a very, very clear subject in terms of if you look at a kind of a catalog, TV catalog that will jump out, it's a very, very clear kind of topic, as it were. But again, I think for the pitch, you can be a lot clearer on the how. And I think mentioning that you have been filming 2-3 years and what's been happening and what's been going on along that journey with what we're basically going to see, I think would help a lot. But I think it's an engaging pitch, and obviously you can see that you invested. The fact that you come in with your personal story, I think also helps one get into the pitch a lot. Any other quick comments? Or Sylvia, do you want to?
No. Tim?
No. If you want to talk at lunch, by all means.
Anybody else? Any other inputs? Is there anything you'd like to see or hear that you're not seeing or hearing yet?
I would like to see a story. With to repeat from earlier, story must have conflict. Yes, you have conflict. Yes. It's also a journey, though, a journey of discovery. Whatever a good story is, with any luck at all, it's a journey of discovery. And I'm not sure that you've gone far enough in telling me the process, the journey toward discovering what. Just another promotion, just another job. I don't know what the worth. See, every good story also has a stake at heart. What is at stake? What is perhaps being given up? What risks are being taken to get what? What is the bliss or the delight with the magnificence that comes at the end or not. It's a journey.
Because again, I mean, what is your narrative structure? Again, what are we going to see as a story?
I think basically what you're going to see when what I want my audience to come up with once they've done watching is to understand that in African tradition, especially the Sangoma regime, there is no male or female. There is your sexual orientation does not affect your spiritual life. You know, like for an example, in terms of gender inequality, that thing about guys don't wear skirts. In the Sangoma, that side of the world, men wear skirts, whether they like it or not. Men wear dukes. Men dress the same as women. And when they are dressed according to their spiritual maturity. Whether you're a male or a female, it does not matter, you know. And plus, being gay, which is what I discovered, because I remember with Roxanne, we were like, where's the conflict in this story? You know, we need to find conflict. So I did a couple of vox pops. Yes, I found maybe one, actually I found two. There's a forum called the LGBTI Traditional Healers Forum. They had an event, and the chief spoke there, and he was so against it. He said, there is no way that you can be homosexual and have a calling. It's not in our history, it does not exist, it cannot happen. He said this. Luckily I was there, I recorded it. And then one of the vox pops, there was a man that said, no, that's bullshit, like it can't happen, you know. But I've discovered that 80% of other people that I've approached, they like in this African tradition, this one, it does not matter. Whether you sleep with a dog, whether you sleep with a cow, behind closed doors, we focus on the spirit and the gift that you have, you know. So we break this one. So I want people, when they're done watching it, to understand that, you know, that these two are two different worlds.
Okay, so maybe if the conflict is not necessarily built from that, just think of other ways of just having some kind of a narrative conflict to generate your story, because that you feel she's overcoming something, and maybe it's leaving university and leaving her dream in order to pursue a calling that's beyond her control, and what the cost is of that to her life, or just something, just feeling that she has to overcome or negotiate certain things to get to it. Okay, so let's move on to, thank you for that, let's move on to Pasna, Little Woman Hanging.
So when I was 16, I spent...
You want to stand up?
No, I'll just talk. So when I was 16, I spent 3 months in hospital, which almost resulted in my death. I emerged after several major surgeries, forever changed. So Little Woman Hanging is a creative experimental film or approach to these autobiographical events of trauma. A sort of ethereal and poetic film follows the experiences of a cursed female patient at a medical institution. The film challenges characteristic documentary form, merging visual artwork and narrative film. And so I can summarize it as it is being a creative experimental approach to autobiographical events of trauma.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think the same as the other projects. Look, it's great that it's, you know, it's going to be autobiographical, and you've got the artists to bring into it. So it's exciting to see how you play with format, but again, also what is the story, what is the journey, what do we see otherwise, you know, knowing like a bit more about what you plan to show, understanding what is the story really.
Also, when you're talking about something that's so deep and so close to your heart, it's you. You almost died. Very few people around this table have almost died. But we are all extremely intrigued by it and interested in it. You talk about an experience that is so momentous, so big, like it's a trip to Checkers.
Yeah.
And I don't know why you're doing that, and I suspect it's connected to the reason why you wouldn't stand up. I think you're trying to withdraw at the same time as you want to put the story out there. You're afraid of standing up because what happens when you almost die is that you're completely stripped. You're exposed to the real thing, to the real important stuff in the universe. All of this nonsense is gone, okay? So you got to this point where you were completely stripped, very exposed. It was painful, it was traumatic, it was changing. It changed you in a way that is very deep and very fundamental. So now you have difficulty talking about that. So if you have difficulty talking about that, I understand that, but you cannot pitch your story if you can't cope with talking about it. Then you must find somebody else to pitch your story, and somebody that you're working with, because you clearly have huge difficulty getting up in a public place and going through some of that again, because words and thoughts are powerful. They take us back into that place. So when you stand up in public and you have to go back into that place, it's difficult. And it's difficult in a room full of strangers. So because you have that difficulty, you have one of two choices. Either you overcome the difficulty by using a room like this, or you give that job to somebody else, and your job on the film is to provide your story.
I think another reason why I don't really have a proper synopsis of the story is because there isn't really a narrative to follow. It's just simply events happen and it doesn't have a sort of narrative structure to it. So there isn't a...
Life is a narrative, okay? We get narrative structure from real life. We didn't make it up. Life and the way the universe is constructed is a story, okay? We get storytelling structure from that. We didn't make it up. So all you have to do is say, I was really, really ill. You don't talk about this in the third person or in the abstract like you do. You go right into it. And what happened? Give me a name for this illness if it had a name. Or if it didn't have a name, even better. Mysterious something happened. And it's not enough to say, I almost died. When you almost die, things happen. Your mind, things happen. Your body, things happen. Horrible things that other people don't know about. Give us at least 3 of those things. Explain it to us. Tell us that you didn't recognize your relatives, or your hair fell out, or whatever. But we have to have a physical thing to hold on to. You're comfortable talking in the abstract, but the abstract is not storytelling. The abstract is for professors who sit in universities and don't know better. So tell us the real thing that happened to you, although it's difficult, or give that job to somebody else.
Well, maybe an alternative thing that you can do is to try to turn your difficulty of speaking about it into a positive. Because if you, I think I agree with what you say. It's such a huge thing. None of us have been in that situation, presumably nobody else in the room has been in that situation. You've had insight into mysteries that we grapple with. You know what I mean? You've been there. And I think it's such a huge thing. So for you to kind of just summarize it like that, I'm sure it's been a life-changing event. At least mention that this was a fundamental, huge which must have been a huge life-changing event for you. But you can say something like, again, don't read it from the page, speak about it. Absolutely don't read it from the page. If you mention your pitch that you can even say, as you can see, I find it very hard to speak about this in words. That is the reason why you're making a film, isn't it? Because in a sense, you're an artist, you're a visual artist. Imagine that one of the reasons you want to make a film is because you find it so hard to speak about. And I'm thinking if you can find, I don't know if I'm correct, but because that would be a very, and it would also justify why you want to make it in a more abstract way. And then I think once you start speaking about your art, which I presume you're more comfortable speaking about, that will bring us back to being able to speak about the other thing. I'd also be a little bit wary about, because you said that before and you said it now about moving away from traditional documentary form or characteristic documentary form, because there's a lot of, that's no longer, you can speak maybe moving away from television form, but documentary is an extremely wide form, and there's quite radically experimental digital documentaries that have actually made it in the mainstream. So, I mean, maybe if you're going to say something like that, you know, just maybe say something about traditional television storytelling style, or TV style, or whatever. But I mean, I think because, you know, the commission editors you speak to will have seen a very wide range of commission, and so they think, well, does that reflect that you haven't watched lots of documentaries? So just be aware of that. But I think, I mean, my suggestion would be maybe think of how you could work with your resistance to speaking as part of your pitch, as a justification for a film.
Yeah. So.
Just wanted to comment. Like, I think first of all, thank you for sharing, because I'm sure it was very difficult for you to share something like that with a group of strangers. But one of my favorite documentaries of all time is about, it's like a very poetic experimental approach to talking about family trauma. Maybe it would be worth checking it out. It's called Elena by Petra Costa, and it like embodies the difficulties in families. It's about the filmmaker's sister who committed suicide, and it explores the family's history through like archive and different poetic visuals, and it's just so beautiful and lyrical, and it's very like atypical, but then it also does adhere to some turning points, so it's really interesting just to look at.
How long are you thinking of making it for? Like short?
So currently it's a 45-page script.
So it's scripted.
A little bit short. So I actually haven't decided yet, but I was thinking perhaps shorter rather than longer.
Maybe as an idea, because we went to like Visions to Real last year, and that's a festival in Switzerland that you know, screens more experimental kind of cinema. So maybe check their website and see.
What website was that?
It's Vision to Real or EEL, and then you can, because they post like trailers of films that they've accepted. So maybe just like going through the website and just getting an idea of how you could work it. Yeah.
Because if you think about it in a way, it could be a gift. Like, I mean, how do you represent the unknowable, or things that people, what you can't film that nobody else has experienced? How do you represent that in film? I mean, that's a really big challenge, but it's a very positive challenge. And I think, I mean, if you compare, there's been a few films about people going blind, and how filmmakers, there's a film called Blind Sight. I mean, there's another famous film that came out in the late or early year 2001 or something. But I mean, where people dealt with being blind on film, like, you know, so how do you represent that? And those films did extremely well. A lot of them kind of did the festival round, actually sold on TV as well. So, and in a way, if that is part of your frame as a challenging film, people might actually add to the saleability if you position it right. Any other final quick comments before we move on? Okay, thank you for that. I'm interested, I really want to see what you do with the film. To Jimmy with Mermans.
Hi, my name is Jimmy. I'm director for Music is My Animation. The band members and Jason both left DXC about 15 years ago. They go but separately, and the way they are achieved, they end up in South Africa. So formerly they create a group called Afro Verster. Afro Verster is a group for all African people they live in South Africa. It's like for 1999, 2004, 2005. So both members and Jason, they live in Cape Town for 15 years ago. And they create Afro Verster. They released first album in 2005 called Afro Verster. And recently, Music is My Munition is the second album for them. Also, I want to focus for members, because members is the one of the key, is the one of, like they say, Gorilla Fighter. He's do a lot for African music, and he's one of the member for Play for Change. He's one movement. He's all everyone in the world, because of the music is called as a one spirit of love. So members is the one who teach around the world about the kid for two years, yeah, 2 years to 16 years. how you can create your own music, how you can sing. So apparently they open school around the world. So we have a school also in Cloete. They teach the kid how they can start their dream, how they become the musician, how they can play drum. So I want just to focus for the main character, his members. Our business members were busy in US to collect his footage for how he's doing, which job he's doing that side, because he's helping all Indian, native Indian, people for South America, people for Africa, and people for Europe. He teach them music, how they can perform. He was also helping the event for Peter Tosh last year for legalized marijuana in Jamaica. Actually, I want to focus for members to tell us his true life music and his real life, how he enjoyed the South African community from 1999 till 2005. Mark Johnson, he was meeting in Sloan Street for create a group for make peace in the world. He was the one of the musicians going to Arab country to play with Israeli in Palestine. They make them become together by music. So I just want to focus on his life. And for me, it's interesting to make like South African talk, not like American or rest of the world. So I'm much more focused for music and animation. If we can see a little bit about trailer, so maybe.
No, it was just fire.
Okay, just a quick one to watch out for spelling in the subtitles. Maybe just check that again, because we all make spelling mistakes, but sometimes those words have other meanings, so just check that out again. But I think one question here is, so Mimas is the main character, right? And so how do you transform a documentary into not just being like a profile piece? You know what I mean? Like if we look at what Shamila Siddharth did with the Tulimaransela documentary, right? Could have easily just been this profile biography piece on the public protector, but you know what, it became more than that, because we got to go really into her personal life. We even learned about her children, so, and the conflicts there. So, you know, I guess I'm looking for, you know, that how do you transform this from just following this guy and everything is so great and the music is amazing, what else? You know, I guess it's like a so what thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just one, this is just highlight, and I want just to focus for his life, for his family, how he's getting married in South Africa, how he's integrated into the society, and then I'll move for another character, because he's one member, he's got three characters: father, star, and human rights activity. So I'll use three characters of one man.
Okay. There's also the film, I think it was called the Hip-Hop, the Revolution on or something like that by Rama Tio, right? She followed like a hip-hop group that was also trying to change things in Senegal. Yes. So there you understood like the so what of the story, because yes, these were great musicians, but they were also they were political activists at the same time. And you also got to understand, there were different layers to them, like you're saying now, and so that needs to come to the forefront.
Yes,
yeah.
that's true. Yes, that's what I want to do. I want to make I want to make his story.
Yeah, so that it's not.
Just only for how he's end up in South Africa, how he's trying to believe his music is his ammunition because he's already struggling. End up in Angola, Brazzaville, he's go to Gabon, he's end up to Namibia, and then South Africa. So in South Africa, now it was the way of opportunity where he was met Mark Johnson. Mark Johnson is one of the directors of Play for Change. It's a movement for Play for Change worldwide. So when he meets Mark Johnson here in Long Street, everything was open for him. And Mark Johnson gave him some opportunity to look after the band and help the rest of the world about his music, how he's helping, he sing, you can create your own song, you can live with your heart. In your heart, you can live for your heart. So what for me feeling interesting to explore his idea on the media, also on the streets, because it was one of the key is give us knowledge for another language, because for him the thing is helping because he's know the key is language is the key. So it's very important for me to explain.
Yeah. I think it's understanding the different levels to this position. There was also a documentary about Abdullah Ibrahim, but I can't remember the name now, where really got
There was perfect timing.
the perfect timing, yeah.
I think what is important is that you are a person who has crossed borders. And to cross borders, you have to take on another language. Suddenly you have to express yourself in a language that is foreign, that is not your own, that you're not that competent in, okay? The music crosses borders without that problem. So what you have to do is to find a way of telling the story of how music crosses borders without using formal national languages, and relate it to your own story. What is your difficulty crossing borders, living in another culture, completely different set of rules, different languages, not just one, but many different languages, and what language you use to do that, okay? And how music helps people. So then yes, it's a story about Mermans, but it's a story about a man who has worked, whose art has worked in these different places, across these different borders. And then you can identify with that as a person who has crossed borders yourself.
Okay, for me, I think in terms of your pitch, I think it would help to start off just with the kind of introductory line saying this is the film that covers so who's traveled from Japan. This is just kind of laid out like really clearly up front that we know, because I think it takes a while before you kind of get to understand what the film really is. I wanted to have again a lot more about how you would tell the story. I mean, now the questions you've kind of spoken more about that, but I think in the pitch maybe give an idea of what we're going to see. You speak a lot about international travel. Are you going to be filming with him? Are you going to be traveling with him to all these places? If so, then of course there's questions around budget. This is going to be a very big budget documentary. If you're traveling around the world, that's something commission editors will
We work in team, another people there always like Mark Johnson is my assistant director.
Is that Matt Johnson from the
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then he's helping me get some footage in US. Also, I suppose to be with them, but I'm so busy to collect.
But maybe mention that because people might not know who Matt Johnson is. So to say of the band which was a big hit band in the 80s and 90s, but they know that you've got serious support and potential serious money that they, just kind of raises the profile of the project. I'd also like, and then also people might in the same way, they might ask about music rights. Is this going to be a kind of a big, what is your situation with music rights? Are you going to have free rights to use all this music? Commission editors might ask about that. But just generally still, I mean, I'm not clear about the story. It seems to me that your film is about music as a tool for peace. So in that sense, what is the antagonist? What is your character fighting against? And in a sense, he is fighting against war. He's fighting against division. He's fighting against nationalist divisions, as Sylvia suggested. So I think in your trailer or in your pitch, you can actually put that a lot more clearly. I mean, why did he escape from DRC? I mean, okay, you know this war, but I mean, what is the visceral reality of somebody who grew up there, and did he lose family members? Did he see his village burned down? Whatever. I mean, what is the reason? I think you can work a lot more with what is the horror that music is both helping to escape from, or that his music is fighting against. I think you can establish the antagonist, even the abstract, a lot, or in terms of his personal life, a lot more strongly, I think. And then also, as Nadine said, maybe different sides. I think just explain this is going to be a profile, but also following a mature. Just explain to us what we're going to see. The trailer, I don't know, maybe without people like this, but I would be quite careful showing it for a number of reasons. The first one is that somebody else is speaking all the time. You don't see him speaking. I mean, somebody else is speaking about him.
I just use voice pop for making things easy. I also use voice pop cutaways. So we have like 500 for his old footage. Then I just choose.
Okay, but I would speak quite clearly. Let him speak in his voice, because people want to get to know him. They want to know. You're not even clear always which one is who he is or who is the main character. So you have to be really, because people, you've made a pitch about a musician. What you want to see in the trailer is you want to hear his music, you want to hear him speak, you want to see what he looks like. And I'm not really getting any of that clearly. And I think to use La Bamba, I mean, rather use one of his own songs. I mean,
La Bamba is one of the Congolese roots, because we're coming from Cuban music. And so also in 1939 we already sang La Bamba in Quebec.
Okay, but does he have original music that he wrote?
Yeah,
because I'm sure people, I mean, at least for an outside audience, would want to see his music, obviously, because you're making a music film. I mean, and a music film is also sold on the strength and the interest and the likability of the music. And for me, La Bamba, rather use something a little bit more original. Because some people might say they're just playing a cover. I mean, they might not know that there's a historical connection. I think that's quite an important point. And also, like I say, this idea of somebody speaking for him. I mean, I want to hear his voice. I want to see what he looks like. I want to see what his musical skill is. I mean, you have an opportunity to show that, and I think that the trailer might actually work against that. So just be. I think I would work more on the trailer if I was you.
Thank you.
Any other comments before we go to the last pitch?
Okay, cool. It was cool. Also, I just want to say, if you're ever going to pitch to someone who isn't from like South Africa or even Africa at all, there are definitely parts where I know what you're saying, but then when you start speaking very quickly, just with your accent, it does get difficult for me to understand. And obviously that's something that you want to know. Even though you said you want to make this film for South Africans, for Africans, if you're ever pitching to a room of non-Africans, and there were a lot of parts where it was difficult for me to know what you were saying, what you were speaking about, even as someone who's lived here for 3 years and lived in Africa for 3 years. And also, I'm just wondering what your reasoning for even putting subtitles on that trailer is, just because he is speaking English and then the subtitles are in English. And many of them are like misspelled or not the correct word. So you don't want it to seem like you don't know what he's saying or how to spell it, do you know what I mean? So I would just maybe take the subtitles out, because he speaks very clearly if you're going to go ahead and show this and use it as something, just to give people an idea maybe of what you're talking about. I don't think that the subtitles are needed, so.
Thank you. Because on full movies, going to be a multi-language.
Okay.
Yeah, then I'll try to put the subtitles.
Then maybe get someone to look at them.
That's I'll look at it works. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, we've got 20 minutes left. Are we still going to have a chance to do the guys? Or?
We have one more pitch?
Yeah.
Yes, let's do the last pitch, and then we got 2 minutes per person.
Okay, we probably don't even have 2 minutes per person.
Yeah, I'm going to need to leave the conference because I'm screaming.
Okay. All right, so let's move to Odette, the world's greatest export.
Hi, I'm Odette van Rensburg, and I am from Zimbabwe, and I am making a film called Zimbabwe's Greatest Export, which is not about platinum or gold, it's about its people, the Zimbabweans. It's been estimated, though we're not exactly sure of the figures, is between 3 and 5 million Zimbabweans have come to South Africa in the last 20 years. I'm going to cover in the film the reasons for the mass migration, but the importance for me and the reason that I'm doing this film is about the breakup of the nucleus of the family. So as I've come to South Africa quite regularly, I've noticed that when speaking to the Zimbabweans that I have found who most are highly educated and doing menial jobs, cooking burgers, as waiters, etc., and are also being exploited big time. And of course are also facing xenophobic attacks. We want to cover all of those areas, but more importantly was how they made the decision to leave their family. And the culture that I'm brought up in, family doesn't have that stronghold like it does with Zimbabweans. And that's my fascination. Because the majority of the Zimbabweans who are here, the reason that they are here is to send money back to at least 5 or 6 members of their family every month. So not only are they being exploited by companies who know that they don't have to pay them the same as they pay other workers within their organizations, because most of them are undocumented. That means that they don't have passports. A lot of them even go across the border and they swim the Limpopo River. Most are raped and robbed before they even get to Messina. And often when they do arrive and they start looking for work, they find that they are just going to have to accept any job that they can, because that's the point of them being here, is that they need to earn as much money as they possibly can to send back, so they have 2 or 3 jobs anyway. So we're going to cover we're going to interweave a whole lot of different characters in the story, but I've got 2 main characters. I've got 2 friends. I have Alfred, who is a rags to riches story. It's quite an amazing story, actually. When he arrived, he started working as a gardener in Johannesburg. And he decided that he wanted to start making leather garments, goods, bags, etc. So he started to save up his money as a gardener, and he got a few tools, and then they were stolen from him. And so then he started working again and saving up some more money. And the story goes on and on about how many times whatever he did to improve himself, he was robbed. And eventually he managed to get some more tools, and he started to make dog collars. And he went to a shop in Simonstown, and he had made 6 dog collars, and he asked the woman if she would sell them for him. And she did, but she didn't give him money. So he eventually went into the shop one day, and he demanded that he gets money from the clients who were there. It's a coffee shop, or he wasn't going to leave. And all the clients were made aware of what had happened to him and his story, and they started to give him money for the money that was owed to him from the collars. Alfred now has a very, very successful shop in Simonstown. It's called Afrique, and he does the most incredible leather garments, bags, all sorts of things made from leather. But he has a friend that works with him, and his name is Eddie. Eddie is mature and very graceful. Eddie was a police officer in Zimbabwe, and then he went on to be human resources for Coca-Cola and became a very, very successful businessman. And then, as all the things have happened in Zimbabwe, a lot of businesses have closed, a lot of people are made redundant. The unemployment rate is 90%. And of the people that are employed, 90% of them earn $200 a month. 90% of the people who work earn $200 a month. So I will go into all these areas as to why the Zimbabweans come to South Africa. I will go into the history of the economy and the statistics, etc. But Eddie is a very sad story, because he just was not able to find decent work in South Africa. He teaches chess, and he actually has a very, very successful pupil who's won quite a lot of chess tournaments, but he's just not making it for himself. And Alfred has given him a job in his shop, even though, of course, Eddie's way overqualified and he's maturer. And so for Eddie, he feels like he's really failed, but also his family, like most Zimbabweans, have left most of their family behind. So he's got the gogos and the grannies and the aunties looking after his children, and he feels that they're going to be installing values into the family that are not his own. So there's a real conflict within. Alfred is single, so he doesn't have those issues, so he's got a mother who he feels very fondly about and he's in communication with regularly, and he sends money back for her. Eddie's wife is in Zimbabwe, she's actually got cancer, and right now he's sending money back for her treatment. The importance of this film for me is the breakup of the family nucleus under the Mugabe regime. And the common thread for all the people that we've interviewed is that this is not home.
I think this theme of the breakup of the nucleus of the family it's the universal one, right? Like that's into the story. And this having to send money back to the family, not supporting people who aren't with you. So that's how I was, when we started, getting into Alfred's story, I was also like my questions were, okay, so he keeps getting robbed and he has a bit of bad luck, and how does that affect his family back home? And maybe just getting into that a bit sooner, like what is this meaning of the money to him, and what are the greater risks of him losing that, And I know it's a story of migration, but perhaps the pitch would work more or maybe it's a suggestion of just these friends, Eddie and Alfred, and the very different lives. And that you said Eddie, his children are not with him, and other people are raising his kids, and so it's greater sense of like risk for him and so on. So I would want to know more about Eddie and Alfred's relationship, I guess, and making the universal more to the fore. So the family nucleus, the friendship, and what do we see with these two main points? But I'll be interested in.
Okay, that's a similar point, because I think this is clearly a more issue-driven film, or at least the way you presented it. It's very much raised by your concern about the issues. And you're very clear on what the film is, you're very clear on why you want to make it, and you're very clear about the situation, but I'm not yet clear on how it's being told. Is it going to be with Arthur?
I'm not very clear right now. I'm not very clear right now how I want to do, because we're not sure of them who will be prepared to actually be seen in the camera.
Okay. Okay, because of the legal issues.
Yeah, exactly, because they're undocumented.
Okay, so that's obviously a huge thing too.
It is. So we're thinking of using a lot of photography.
Okay. Because just following Nadine's lead here, you could, a story of two friends working in a shop together as observational film and then slowly unpacking their histories could be a really nice starting point for a less issue-driven film, I guess, or a film where the issues come through the story rather than the characters illustrate the issues. So I think that's just because the way you started pitching it would suggest more of a current affairs type film, less of a kind of cinema documentary film. But that's obviously a decision you need to make. But I think if you wanted to go the route of observation or filming them in contemporary life, I think that the idea of the context of the shop and this overqualified guy being frustrated, it's a very nice documentary situation to start a film. The idea of how do you incorporate the past into observational film is really tricky, and was the main editor on Shimila's, my wife's film, Chilimansela. And one of the biggest challenges was how do you, the two biggest things that happened in her story is basically the Nkandla story and then the state capture. So we filmed her last year in office, but her year started with a court case, constitutional court case on Nkandla. But the whole Nkandla story had happened before we started filming. So the trick was then how do we make an observational film, the frame of the film was her last year in office, but such a big part of the story had happened beforehand. And it was really, really difficult. So we used a lot of tricks to make that happen and intercut things. And the end, it more or less works. But I think that's how you tell the past in a contemporary observational film is a very, very tricky thing. Yeah. So I think you should just think about that. And maybe it happens in the sense that they reveal their past in very intimate, observed moments where they start chatting to you. Or however, maybe the past can be the mystery that unfolds as the film goes along or something like that. I just think in terms of your pitch, I think you stayed on, it was very concise and clear, and then when you went to Alfred and Eddie, it was too long. Okay. It was too much, I know you guys felt, but it felt to me you stayed on a little bit too long. But I think people believe your desire to make the film, one buys your interest and your passion about the story, which I think goes a long way. Is this, Sylvia, we've got 7 minutes, so we just maybe get some final comments? Greetings to Refuel and Terence. Or maybe, what we could do is maybe everybody can do a 1-minute pitch of the final.
I'm happy with everybody doing something. We've just been joined by Refuel and Terence from the NFAF. Quick introduction, you guys.
Good day, everyone. My name is Terence Kumar, I'm Manager Film Certification at the NFAF. And lightly responsible for co-productions. Glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Refuel. I'm the production and development coordinator for non-fiction projects at the NFAF. I mostly help with the admin duties of our department.
Okay, and as we said earlier, the NFAF is one of the only organizations in Africa that funds documentaries in development. And most of you would fall into a group, the applications are tiered, so you would fall into a tier where you have the advantage of being emerging filmmakers and their short films are sometimes undersubscribed. So everybody's applying to make 1-hour films and feature-length films, but not enough really good ideas are coming through for those half-hour short films for emerging filmmakers. So some of the ideas that we've heard here this morning could end up going that route. Okay, I would suggest that Odette has to leave, so she starts.
Sorry.
Start.
Can I just say, I don't know if it's because we have got all this feedback, but we don't really have time to implement change on
We're going to assume that you could internalize some of it and just put your idea out there, not as a formal pitch, but just having listened to everybody, having thought through some of the things. If you had to meet Refuel or Tim or Francois in a lift, and you had to say in 1 minute and a bit, what is my film about? Just having spent this morning. So life is not ideal, it's full of terrible pressures.
To Terence and Refuel, just to give you some context, these are newly formed ideas. A lot of this morning's session was exactly about trying to help the filmmakers establish what their story and what the pitch might be. So it's not a developed pitch, so don't judge them as you would judge a shaped pitch. But I think, guys, it's a fantastic opportunity to have both Terence and Refuel here. And hopefully that you will be speaking to them about your films in due course. So it's a very good opportunity for you guys to at least introduce them to your project. So I think maybe, as Sylvia suggests, maybe think of it as not an elevator pitch, just you've met somebody who you think might become involved with your film at a future date, and you just very briefly want to tell them within a couple of lines in less than a minute what your film is about.
So what this person would be looking for is your passion. Put that in. And the fact that you can sum it up just like that. And we know that it's always hard to do the shorter version of your film. As Mark Twain said, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write a short letter.
Okay, so shall we start with the lid? So that you have to go.
Okay. And sorry, I have to leave. My name is Odette van Rensburg. My name is Odette van Rensburg, and I am from Zimbabwe. I'm making a film called Zimbabwe's Greatest Export. It's not about platinum or gold, it's about Zimbabweans. There are estimated that there are 3 to 5 million Zimbabweans who are economic migrants living in South Africa. And my interest in the film is about the breakup of the nucleus of the family under the Mugabe regime. Most of the families have split up, and members of the families are all over the world making money and sending it back to the families that are left in Zimbabwe. This film will cover a relationship between Alfred and Eddie, who are friends. Alfred has come from rags to riches. He arrived in South Africa with nothing, and he was robbed a lot along the way. And now he's become very successful, and he has his own shop. Eddie is a mature man. He's a chess player. He's a chess coach, and he has a very successful pupil. And their friendship is based on the fact that Alfred has given Eddie a job inside his shop, even though Eddie is overqualified. He was a police officer, and he also is human resources for large organizations in Zimbabwe. And now he's finding himself working inside a leather shop. The story will cover the challenges that they faced, but more importantly, how difficult it was for them to make the decision to leave Zimbabwe, to leave their families, and live in a country that is not home.
Right. Shall we just go down the table?
Yes.
Thanks, Nadine. So shall we just go down the table? Or?
Let's switch that on.
Sorry.
Good luck with your film.
Good luck.
Bye.
Hi, my name is Judy Stewart, and I study screenwriting, and I'm also from Zimbabwe. My documentary looks at the role of missionaries within the liberation movements, well, particularly in Zimbabwe, which are also relevant to South Africa. And I follow a very small rural community where there was where the liberation war was happening, and the political and religious conflicts, and the courage of a missionary doctor and a liberation fighter. That's me.
Okay, hi, my name is Jessie Zinn, and my project Song of Ascents is in production with the NFPF. So basically my project, when you think of your grandparents or older people, maybe a parent, a relative, what do you think that they're doing? Taking a nap, eating a meal? Maybe actually they're busy trying to bribe people for votes and campaign for an upcoming resident committee election. That's what my film's about. It's about Cape Town's oldest old-age home, Highlands House, and it follows a year's cycle in the life of the home, following the people that live there and work there, and following all of the different crazy things that the residents get up to while campaigning for their upcoming resident committee election. The film will be moving in between different carers that take care for the residents, including a character named Rubantu, who's been working there for over 15 years, Juliet, a 92-year-old new resident of the home, Joss, a burgeoning amateur photographer, and Eric, the new stud of the hot house, who's been secretly plotting, the new stud of the home, who's been secretly plotting to take over the hot house. A lot of drama, a lot of excitement. The film will be taking a look at some of the issues that linger, looking at the differences between the carers and the residents, but trying to take a comedic approach to these issues. So that's
Hi, I'm Ashley, and I'm making a film called Blend. This film is a translation of my own experience of being in an interracial relationship in the current South African context, but I'm doing it through another couple, Leonard and Monique, who are a white, she is a white Afrikaans woman and he is a black Xhosa man, but he was adopted by a white family. So he kind of has a slightly different dynamic, and he was adopted at the age of 6, so he was kind of brought into this context not from birth. And I want to follow their story from their sort of courtship until their marriage or their wedding, which happened last year, and following their love story until that point, and possibly the difficulties and complications that they had within just society and with their families, and how they felt about their relationships. That's all.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Vollenhoven. My film is Little Woman Hanging, and it outlines a very creative take on my own issues of trauma that I've experienced in hospital. It goes through in a sort of fictionalized manner the amount of emotional trauma and suffering that I went through whilst in hospital. And so it is a sort of cathartic, artful type experimental documentary.
Hi guys, my name is Sandy Swachefu, and I'm making a documentary about homosexual traditional healers and how we can, and how in the African tradition of sangomas and healers, African healers, it's been mainly dominated by heterosexual men who, when homosexuals come into their space because of the gift that they have, spiritual gifts, being judged and undermined and sometimes called witchcraft, practicing witchcraft, or rubbing off their gayness to the people that they're healing. So it's kind of like an activist movement to try and documentary to make sure that everyone is balanced, because as we might know or not know, in the African tradition of sangomas and traditional healers, men wear skirts and everyone is equal, and they differentiate between sexuality and spirituality. So when you go into that space, you are judged as a spirit, not by your sexual orientation. What you do behind the doors when you're not in that space is your business. So yeah, that's all my story is about.
Hi, my name is Jimmy Magala. I'm director for film Music is My Ammunition. Is a film I'm talking about the guys. He was moving to DRC to end up in South Africa after a difficult situation, and he's trying to believe what he was thinking about his life. His Music is My Ammunition, and he tried to teach human rights about the kid music from 2 years to 16 years, and how he performed his life for world music and political issue.
Francois Verster, Charles Human. I'm doing the movie about the revival of the Khoisan language. Basically, the language that I'm going to focusing on is Khoisan. Khoisan is a language that is spoken about the Khoi. We're going to focus about 2 individuals. One, Bradley, and the other one, Denver. Bradley is a highly skilled, I must add it, highly skilled individual who got upgraded, and yes, he left all that behind. Refused to speak his given Afrikaans language and promote just Khoi. I'm going to follow his life, and I'm also going to see where did the language got lost in the first place, and how they revived it, and how they are currently promoting the revival of the language. We're going to see how they are doing. We're going to see also the trend that our language has been transformed, pushed into social media, learned by other people in South Africa, and to see how we're going to make this language revived again. So hopefully at the end of the movie, this language will be part of the 13th language, which is currently not in the South African education system. There's a glimpse of promoting the language in the education system, but it's focusing on as a side subject, not as a main subject. So after this movie, hopefully the language will be into the schools in South Africa and being taught and being spread in South Africa as the 13th language. Thanks.
Hello, Terence and Rafiwe. My name is Nikki. I go on a journey to find sacred sites around Southern Africa. I follow a barefoot archaeoastronomer up the mountains in the Western Cape, over big hills and under bushes to find little known stone sacred sites that have been carved to mathematical precision, faces and sacred geometry shapes where the sun shines through holes that have been drilled through them, and it's doing that for the first time in 21,000 years. I also go to Mpumalanga, to the oldest known man-made site in the world, Adam's Calendar, and I speak to a very controversial man named Michael Tellinger. He has a very large following, very interesting man. And my journey is to find why these sites are there, what they're there for, and was it an ancient culture that put them there, and what kind of information or possibly lost information was there that we can find through exploring these sites. Thank you.
Hi, Terence and Ursula. Thanks for coming. I'm Roxanne. I'm going to tell you about my documentary project called Last Night, A Haircut Saved My Life. It's going to begin in Lavender Hill, one of the areas in Cape Town notorious for its gang violence, the gunshots that ricochet daily in the streets, and has generations upon generations of trauma in this one community, often surrounded by, ironically, more wealthier areas. But the film begins in Lavender Hill and it's going to end in an ashram in India, and follows the unusual journey of this young girl, Jebunisa Ratus, who's an aspiring hairdresser, as she begins to raise money to start her own business, becoming a mobile hairdresser, while at the same time she's beginning to teach meditation classes right out of her tiny little flat right in Lavender Hill. So we'll follow the highs and lows of her journey as she begins to run this business and empower herself financially, while at the same time working to inspire and uplift the community around her. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. I think all of the pitches have shown remarkable improvement over today. I think we all agree with that. And as I said, it's a continuing conversation. Everybody is around. If you'd like to speak to either of us, we'd be very happy to give more input as well. And yeah, we wish you best of luck with your projects.
Thanks for coming, and those of you who are not yet members of the DFA, I strongly recommend that you join so that you can be part of initiatives like this and updated about opportunities in the industry. We'll be here, I will be here for the rest of the afternoon. Please stay if you can for some of these sessions on documentary funding and the broadcasting environment and co-productions and impact reducing. There will be somebody from the NFF, two people from the NFF that you've met. There will also be somebody from the South African Broadcasting Corporation's board. The SABC doesn't often come out of its shell to face the public. So